They say a mercenary who doesn't fear death is nothing but third-rate. Amidst the blazing battlefield, black crows circled the corpses, waiting for their feast. They rake in massive bounties because they sell their lives to their masters without hesitation. The gleaming blade reflected a crimson glare, signaling a brutal end. A piercing thrust, blood splattering without an ounce of mercy. That was the price paid for blind loyalty on this battlefield. Jake casually poured a stream of amber liquor from his flask. The golden glow of the liquid made him scoff at the daily bullshit he heard from recruiters. He tipped the flask, draining the last few drops before tossing it aside. To Jake right now, booze held more value than noble promises. Standing on the ramparts overlooking the burning city, Jake clicked his tongue. He reminded himself this was the ungrateful life of a sellsword. Turning his back to the sea of fire, Jake let out a heavy sigh. "You nobles are all the exact same," he muttered with pure disgust. Jake adjusted his collar, his voice dripping with sarcasm over how the higher-ups promised lands and titles whenever they got desperate. He knew this playbook inside out. A smirk crept onto Jake's lips as he mocked their lightning-fast attitude changes. Their oaths sounded nice, but in reality, it was all trash. Jake stood alone on the high wall, his tattered cloak snapping in the wind. He declared the other party's words the peak of absurdity. Jake stared straight ahead, his crimson eyes piercing. He asked if he heard wrong because that demand sounded downright insane. Down below, the commander-in-chief awaited an answer, clad in magnificent silver armor and a majestic blue cape. The two stood in starkly different positions amidst the ruins. The commander's face remained ice-cold. He confirmed Jake heard perfectly right, and what he wanted was for Jake to go die. The commander-in-chief's gaze sharpened, issuing that ruthless order without a shred of hesitation. To him, a mercenary's life was just a pawn. Jake smirked, his face radiating defiance. He shot back, asking if the commander actually remembered who he was talking to. The commander glanced away, his voice staying calm. He admitted he knew full well Jake, the leader of the Fang mercenary group. Jake burst into a hearty laugh, throwing his hands out like he just heard the funniest joke on earth. He joked that he didn't expect such a stiff guy to have a sense of humor. Jake's hand brushed his sword hilt, a gesture proving his high alert despite the smile. Otherwise, the guy would never give orders to a piece of mercenary trash like him. Jake's eyes narrowed, his glare turning freezing cold. He mocked the idea of telling a guy like him to fight and sacrifice with the honor of a noble knight. Wind howled through the stone gaps of the wall, the space between them falling dead silent. The commander-in-chief stood like a statue, unyielding. The commander closed his eyes, sighing as if realizing he misspoke. He apologized, stating he might have caused Jake to misunderstand his intentions. Jake locked eyes with him, the smile lingering but laced with suspicion. He echoed, "Misunderstand." The commander-in-chief continued explaining, gesturing solemnly. He claimed he only wanted to entrust Jake with one final mission. Jake listened in silence, his face betraying deep exhaustion after the regular army's consecutive defeats. He knew exactly how disastrous the current situation was. In the distance, the panoramic view of the city revealed thick black smoke billowing from burning homes. Defeat was staring them right in the face. The Crawford family soldiers stood in silence, the golden eagle crest on their purple flags looking grim in this decaying scenery. The rebels were already breathing down their necks. Jake stared into the void, his eyes tinged with thought for those who protected this land for generations. He realized there was nowhere left to run. A ruined tower crumbled, the Crawford family flag torn and plummeting into the flames. Everything was collapsing. Out of nowhere, Jake threw his arms wide and laughed out loud, his expression lighting up. He claimed he fully understood the commander-in-chief's predicament. Jake stepped closer, his smile turning sinister, revealing sharp teeth. He bluntly declared it was time for him to bounce. The commander stood as rigid as a statue amidst the rubble. Jake secretly praised him, even if he was a stuck-up noble. Jake stared him down, questioning this so-called final mission in this chaotic mess. He guessed the guy wanted him to scout an escape route. The commander-in-chief looked away, his voice dropping heavy with pressure. He announced the rebels would launch a full-scale assault on the city tomorrow. The ruined city gates loomed under a blood-soaked sunset. He demanded Jake stand his ground and hold off the enemy until his master escaped. The commander-in-chief's eyes flared with a bizarre blue light, oozing killing intent. "Until I die," he emphasized every single word. He pulled out a palm-sized, crimson gemstone as a reward, a payout large enough to feed the entire mercenary crew for 3 years. A sharp smack rang out as Jake swatted the gemstone to the ground without a speck of regret. The gem rolled through the thick dust. The commander stood dumbfounded by Jake's action, demanding what the hell he was doing. Jake coldly replied that line belonged to the commander. Jake's expression morphed, his crimson eyes igniting with pure, unadulterated rage. He roared, asking if the guy thought he was a naive idiot just because he smiled a lot. Images of mercenaries fighting in despair flashed through Jake's mind. He pointed right in the guy's face, calling that mission out for turning them into meat shields. Jake's killing intent suffocated the air as he spoke of being discarded just to buy a few seconds for his master's escape. Disgust dripped from his features. The gruesome sight of soldiers crucified on wooden posts, bodies riddled with arrows, served as a grim warning. Jake knew damn well the rebels would never spare their lives. The commander-in-chief looked at Jake, his gaze distant. "You are," he trailed off in the dead silence of the wall. "Mercenaries, not knights." The commander continued, asserting the enemy wouldn't waste effort chasing sellswords once he fell. Jake cracked up, revealing his feral, sharp teeth. "Damn right, that's the rule of survival in this line of work." Jake's eyes burned with provocative crimson. He leaned in, his smile unyielding. "But you know the truth, don't you?" A chaotic scene surfaced in Jake's memories. In the enemy's eyes, the Fang mercenary group was a massive thorn they wanted to hack into 100 pieces. Amidst the battlefield's hazy dust, an enemy soldier coughed violently, having just survived a horrific clash and desperately seeking an escape route. The leader ordered a grunt to check it out. Ignorant, the Grim Reaper lurked right behind him. While the grunt investigated and asked questions, the supposedly wounded soldier gripped a short sword on the ground, the enemy oblivious to his impending doom. SHK, a lethal stab pierced the grunt's neck, blood spraying across his polished armor. The lightning-fast strike left the enemy zero chance to scream for help. Observing from afar, the other soldiers widened their eyes, paralyzed as their comrade dropped dead. Jake emerged, his face smeared with blood and grime, his crimson eyes radiating manic thrill. "Ha! What a flawless trap!" he exclaimed. Frantic screams echoed across the battlefield. "They aren't our guys, it's the Fang mercenary group." Chaos erupted as the enemy realized they walked right into a snare. The mustache commander, leading the enemy forces, widened his eyes in sheer terror from horseback. He bellowed in fury at the ambush. "You bastards!" The mustache commander's face trembled with humiliation. He roared, demanding if Jake possessed a shred of honor, faking death to launch a sneak attack. Slash, a blinding blade cut through the air, severing the commander's head from his neck. A strike without a single wasted movement. Jake landed softly on the ground. A slash so swift and decisive the old bastard couldn't even react. The mustache commander's head rolled across the dirt, blood still pouring onto the dusty earth. A tragic end for a fool who underestimated mercenaries. Jake glanced at his handiwork through his helmet slit, his blood-stained face unflinching. His eyes still burned with ruthless apathy. Back in the present, the crimson gem lay abandoned on the cold stone floor. Jake recounted how many commanders' throats he slit to keep his crew alive this long. Jake closed the distance with the commander, a provocative grin plastered on his scarred face. He stated the rebels out there were thirsting for both their heads. Seeing the commander stay silent, pondering his sharp words, Jake gave a slight smirk, waiting for his reaction. Jake saw right through the guy, his gaze turning razor-sharp. He challenged if the commander planned to use the mercenaries as bait to draw attention. The commander's face remained cold in the shadows. He ruthlessly admitted he just hoped Jake would complete that suicide mission. The commander slowly rested his hand on his sword hilt, a heavy killing intent bleeding into the air. He declared he would execute Jake and lead the mercenaries himself if he refused. Jake reacted instantly, vaulting backward to create distance, a vigilant leap away from the Empire's greatest talent. Jake gritted his teeth, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. "I thought you were different from those noble scums. Turns out you're the biggest piece of trash among them," he roared. The two faced off on the ramparts under the dying sunset. A life-or-death clash brewed between the two men holding the city's fate. Jake gripped his sword hilt, his black-gloved hand steady as a rock. "Sorry, man," he said, his voice dripping with murderous intent, "but this actually works out perfectly." Jake's eyes went wild as the new plan clicked. He stated taking the head of a noble like him and handing it to the rebels would guarantee his crew's survival. The commander-in-chief glanced at Jake's hand resting on his blade. He scoffed, questioning if Jake actually planned to offer his head to the rebels to beg for his life. The commander's eyes flared with a mysterious emerald glow, proving he was ready to end this right now. A terrifying power erupted. Jake reminded himself deep down, as a leader, he had to do whatever it took to protect his brothers until his final breath. Jake sat casually on blood-soaked wooden crates, his sword resting carelessly on his shoulder. He smirked, imagining using the heads of both commanders to satisfy the rebel horde outside. Jake stood up, turning his back on the commander. "Don't tell me, you plan to offer your own head to save the troops," he mocked. The image of a head resting in a wooden box manifested like a dark omen. Jake asked if he orchestrated all this just to save his subordinates. Jake stared into the void, his eyes carrying a hint of remorse. He admitted dragging his brothers into this mess simply out of a selfish desire to crawl out of the mud. Jake stood in silence beneath the blazing sky, having promised his crew they would achieve their dreams together despite starting from the rock bottom. He couldn't break that word. Jake unsheathed his sword, a powerful azure aura enveloping his body. "Because I'm the leader, I have to take responsibility until the bitter end," he affirmed with absolute certainty. The commander stood stunned by Jake's overwhelming presence. He never expected a mercenary to harbor such immense resolve and pride. The commander-in-chief cracked a cryptic smile, seemingly finding something fascinating. "Ha, of course, that makes sense," he muttered. A silence washed over the cold stone wall as the sun vanished. The commander silently acknowledged that this was the true meaning of a genuine leader. The commander covered his face, his voice steeped in endless regret. He wished Jake served him instead of the decaying Crawford family. The commander-in-chief lowered his hand, staring sorrowfully at his opponent. "I wish you were my liege instead of the Crawfords," he whispered. "Yah," Jake roared, leaping and swinging his blade at the commander with terrifying speed and killing intent. The commander-in-chief stood frozen. Jake's face twisted in shock, his eyes bulging with murderous intent. He screamed upon seeing the commander make zero effort to move. The commander stood motionless atop the wall, his blue cape fluttering in the night wind. He bowed his head, closing his eyes while Jake lunged to claim his life. Out of nowhere, the commander's eyes snapped open, revealing a frigid emerald glare. It looked like he had a counterattack ready for Jake's strike. Slash, fresh blood splattered across the cold stone ramparts, painting gruesome crimson streaks. A final message hung in the air. "Don't forgive me, Jake." Jake felt the chill of death consume his body. His vision faded, a long trail of blood running across his battle-scarred face. Jake's decapitated body free fell from the heights to the ground, a pathetic death for someone like him. He never realized the gap in talent and status between him and the commander was this massive. The commander stared at the sword in his hand, murmuring a regretful line about the fallen mercenary. "What a goddamn talent," he sighed. Everything blurred, Jake's mind sinking into a silent void. "Ah, this is fine too," he thought, accepting the end of a life spent in war. Jake closed his eyes, a strange, relieved smile gracing his blood-stained face. He had ordered his brothers to run if he didn't make it back, so he could die in peace. The final drops of blood hit the earth, blending into the thick darkness. Jake felt an unprecedented peace. At least he lived and died like a true warrior. In the deep abyss of his subconscious, one final thought flashed with intense regret. "If only I were handed the same opportunities and status as him," he told himself. Jake's face sank into the crimson waters of painful memories. He wondered if he possessed a noble background, how high could he climb on the ladder of power? Without warning, a voice echoing in his ear shattered the silence of death. A pair of wide eyes with blonde hair snapped awake in utter bewilderment, staring at unfamiliar lights. A blinding light flooded in from a luxurious room. Jake's eyes fell on the anxious face of an orange-haired teenager wearing a servant's uniform. A frail, thin voice escaped from the lavish bed. "Who are you?" he asked in pure panic. A small, pale, and smooth hand reached upward. These hands had never gripped a sword, lacking a single scar. Out of the blue, the servant lunged forward and slapped the living daylights out of him. "Please wake up, young master," he screamed, tears streaming down his face. He clutched his freshly slapped face, the stinging pain too real to be a dream. White smoke rising from his palm left him stunned. What the hell is this? Jake was severely disoriented, realizing a servant just smacked him right in the face the second he woke up. What in the world was happening to this body? The Grand Duke's third son, Jake/Lucian, bolted upright on the soft mattress, blonde hair cascading over his pale face. He stared at the sobbing servant, calling out, "Young Master Lucian." Lucian's innocent yet stunned face featured wide amber eyes. He let out a baffled question. What? He woke up in a dazzling, opulent room, lying on a shimmering golden bed. Next to him was an orange-haired kid wailing like there was no tomorrow. He stared at his pale hands, feeling something incredibly wrong. These hands looked nothing like a battle-hardened warrior's. A sharp glint crossed his eyes as he wondered where his ragged, filthy warrior self vanished to. This squeaky clean sensation felt bizarre. These hands were way too clean, even carrying a pleasant scent without a single scar or callus. He couldn't believe his own eyes. That servant kid just kept kneeling there crying his eyes out, turning the room into a circus. Lucian just sat there watching in silence. Staring at his tear-drenched face, he still couldn't fathom who the hell this was. Just a second ago, he slapped fire into his cheek to wake him up, and now he was crying a river. The kid's choked sobs echoed across the massive room. He seemed to be suffering from a massive psychological shock. He gleefully exclaimed how lucky it was to see the young master alive. He claimed his heart almost stopped when he saw him knocked out cold like that. The kid, Hans, kept rambling about what a massive disaster it would be for the family if this continued. He worried about his own future, too. Lucian frowned, not grasping a single word of the bullshit this guy was spouting. The noise was just giving him a headache. Titles like young master, servant, or family sounded alien. None of this had any connection to his past life. Above all, he remembered clearly dying at that exact moment. Everything should have ended right there. The memory of the lethal strike ending his life flashed back, a death nobody could undo. It was a terrifyingly real memory. Yet here he was, this body intact and breathing steadily. He reached up to check if his head was still attached to his neck. The room fell silent for a moment, leaving him engulfed in pure shock. He started piecing the details together. Only one conclusion made sense right now. This wasn't some dream or hallucination. He realized he inhabited the body of a complete stranger. A brand new life was unfolding before his eyes. A cryptic smile formed as he saw this stranger was no ordinary guy. This appearance held some serious potential. Standing before the mirror, he was stunned to see an incredibly handsome and captivating face. This was the face of someone who could weaponize their looks. He admired himself in the mirror, trying to get used to this new look. Hans stood behind him, looking anxious. Every facial feature radiated the noble aura of a true high aristocrat. One glance proved he came from a serious bloodline. This room reeked of money, packed with top-tier luxury decorations. This family had to be filthy rich and powerful. He glanced at the servant kid through the mirror, deciding to gather more intel about this place and the name staring back at him. He needed to know who he was. He cleared his throat and called out Hans's name. The kid immediately stood at attention, awaiting orders with a respectful demeanor. He bluntly asked what year it was. Hans looked dumbfounded, figuring the young master was still groggy from the drugs. Lucian's face hardened when Hans replied it was the 846th year of the Empire. A piece of intel that flipped his entire reality upside down. Year 846, meaning he went back 15 years before he died on the battlefield. A godsend chance to fix everything. A time vortex illustrated his rebirth into the past. He stood at the starting line of a clean slate. Even though he had no clue why this happened, he knew sitting around acting shocked was useless. He needed to adapt fast to survive. His eyes glinted with resolve. It was time to focus on what needed to be done. He threw out the next question to confirm his status. He glared at Hans, asking if he wanted to die today. A question that paralyzed the poor kid with terror. He grabbed Hans by the collar, an intimidating power move from a superior. Did a servant dare touch his master so casually? His gaze turned sharp, asking if the rules here changed while he was out cold. He was resetting the hierarchy on the spot. He growled the question once more, "Who am I?" The heavy pressure made the room's air suffocating. Hans was so terrified his pupils shrank, sweating buckets because he couldn't figure out what he did wrong. He trembled, speechless. He frantically groveled and apologized, blaming his own panic for committing the grave sin of disrespect. He begged for his master's forgiveness. He screamed in terror, confirming his name was Lucien Valdec, a name echoing with immense prestige and authority. Lucien froze hearing that name. He seemed to recognize something highly specific about it. The Valdec family, could it be the exact family he knew inside out from his past life? The golden lion flag waving proved it without a doubt. A massive, imposing castle materialized, symbolizing this family's supreme power and immense wealth. He never imagined becoming one of them. The Valdec family, a name deeply tied to the Empire's history and dominance. A faction everyone feared and respected. A family long considered the Empire's unbreakable pillar, their influence spanning everywhere. Now he was part of their bloodline. The Valdec family, an ancient noble house standing right beside the Emperor. Their clout was massive enough to clash directly with the royal family. I know this family way too well, actually, he thought to himself, his face full of calculation. Because 15 years ago, the Valdec family was. A magnificent castle appeared with guards standing tall at the main gates. The place he worked as a guard for years. The image of the old Jake returned, yawning his head off in cheap guard armor. And now waking up, I became the third young master of the Valdec family itself. Lucien stared into the mirror, cold sweat running down his face. He could only force a bitter laugh. This ironic twist shattered the imagination of a guy who used to roll around in the battlefield mud. He recalled his past life, back when he was just a mercenary treated like dirt by the nobles. They threw pennies on the ground like feeding a stray dog. A life packed with humiliation and misery just because of his lowborn status. He had to stand in freezing graveyards, soaked in blood after life-or-death battles. Jake held the liquor flask, his eyes burning with hatred and exhaustion amidst the white snow. Is heaven handing me a chance to flip the script? Lucien thought. If I'm given the same opportunity as this young master. He wondered how far he could climb in high society. Fine, if this is fate's will, I'll take it. The decision was locked in, there was no turning back. Keep your eyes wide open and witness this, a mercenary soul inside a noble's shell. Lucien's gaze turned razor-sharp and decisive. His small hand twisted the doorknob, ready to step out of the room that imprisoned him for so long. He wasn't wasting another second. He shoved the balcony doors wide open, embracing the brilliant sunlight and the cool morning breeze flooding the room. Let's see how high I can climb in this trap-filled world. A fierce confidence radiated from his face. And I'll survive in the most spectacular way possible, he swore the oath to the vast sky. The Valdec estate looked incredibly massive and imposing under the sun, an ultimate symbol of the Grand Duke's absolute power and wealth. Lucien strode down the lavish hallway, trailed by a cowering Hans. He remembered traveling far and wide as a mercenary, but this place was on a whole different level. Every piece of furniture, from the chandeliers to the paintings, sparkled brilliantly. Nothing from his past could rival this majesty. He told himself he had to adapt fast to this royal environment so nobody would get suspicious. Everything had to be flawless. However, he sensed something off seeing the maids standing in the distance. The atmosphere grew weird. The servants huddled together, whispering about his sudden appearance after a long disappearance. They stared at him with heavy skepticism. Their gazes aren't normal at all. He felt a crushing pressure from the servants waiting ahead. Dark shadows engulfed the servants, exposing only glowing eyes staring daggers into Lucien, like they wanted to read his soul. He turned to ask Hans if he was overthinking things. Hans looked flustered and anxious at his master's sudden question. Hans said it's been exactly a year and 2 months since the young master stepped out of his room. That was a hell of a long time for total isolation. What's up with that? He wondered why the real Lucien locked himself up and hid from the world all this time. Even if he couldn't grasp noble logic, the guy clearly couldn't act freely in this suffocating mansion. This place housed true giants, protecting the Empire with ironclad principles, and the man at the top was Grand Duke Sigmund. Lucien crossed his arms in deep thought, feeling the pressure from his father's massive shadow in this new body. He needed to tread carefully. A man like Sigmund definitely wouldn't sit back and watch his kid wither away wasting precious time in a room. There was always a reason behind everything. Meaning, Lucien is either a troublemaker the family wants to dump, or there's a reason the Grand Duke ignores him. He started analyzing the situation. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed from behind. He reminded himself to avoid meeting the Grand Duke face-to-face at all costs until he figured things out. So the reports about the young master's recovery are true. A calm voice rang out, startling both Lucian and Hans. A middle-aged man with silver hair and a pristine appearance showed up. He was the family butler who just caught wind of the news. Lucian eyed the butler, internally groaning. "Ah, right, this house also has this old fox." He politely asked if he was well enough to walk around. Hans hurriedly bowed. This was Edwin, the Valdek family's head butler, carrying an incredibly professional and poised demeanor. A guy who wasn't easy to handle. He was known as Grand Duke Sigmund's capable right-hand man. Despite being a hostage from an enemy family, Edwin climbed to this spot purely through outstanding competence. "This is bad. Out of everyone I shouldn't bump into right now, I run into him." He feared his rough mercenary habits would get exposed by this cunning old man. He swallowed his anxiety, trying to keep his face as calm as possible under Edwin's scrutiny. Luckily, the guy hadn't seen Lucian in person for a year. "All right then, I'll try mimicking his vibe." The image of the noble commander from his past life, a man always oozing elegance, popped into his head. That was the most aristocratic, composed person he ever knew. He would use that exact template to fool Edwin. Lucian flashed a perfectly elegant smile, returning the butler's greeting. "I appreciate your concern, Butler Edwin." He flexed a true noble's demeanor with confident eyes. "Thanks to you, I'm feeling much better. During my recovery, I neglected family matters, so I came out to assess the situation, and how fortunate to run into you here." Lucian placed a hand on his chest, a textbook gesture. He calmly flipped the script, questioning Edwin to probe for info. "Has the family run into any troublesome issues lately?" Edwin closed his eyes, smiling gently at the young master's shift in attitude. "Yes, young master. The Valdek family prospers as always, and I am glad you are as well." Lucian breathed a huge sigh of relief inside, seeing his acting hit the mark perfectly. "He doesn't suspect a thing. Good, I can keep acting naturally." He waved his hand, ready to dip after hitting his goal. "Then my mind is at ease. I feel a bit tired stepping out after so long." Edwin suddenly called out, instantly making the air tense. "Young master, if you would permit me one more word." Butler Edwin stood firm behind him, blocking Lucian's exit. "Please stay for a moment." Edwin's gaze turned stricter and sharper than ever. "Right now, someone really wishes to see you, young master." A bead of cold sweat ran down Lucian's cheek as he felt an invisible pressure crush him. His gut screamed something bad was about to go down. He was escorted into an incredibly massive, intimidating study. Behind the heavy wooden desk, a muscular man sat waiting, Grand Duke Sigmund Valdek. Sigmund radiated sheer terror, his eyes veiled in sinister shadows. Clad in a blazing red cape, he gave off the aura of an absolute ruler. Lucian stood rooted to the spot, feeling tiny in the face of his father's colossal presence. The silence in the room was so thick you could hear a heartbeat. Grand Duke Sigmund slightly shifted, his deep, frigid voice echoing out. "Tell me, Lucian Valdek." Lucian just bowed his head in terror. A pair of amber eyes flashed a horrifying glare from the shadows. "How exactly? Are you still breathing right now?" Sigmund Valdek stared his son down with eyes like ice, his blonde beard twitching as he fired off the heavy question. In the middle of the grand study, sitting behind his massive desk, he interrogated Lucian on how he managed to survive that idiotic stunt. Sweating bullets, Lucian forced a clueless look, asking his father what he was actually trying to imply. Sigmund coldly replied, his deep voice revealing he originally planned to turn a blind eye to his past antics. His gaze shifted to the late wife's portrait, aggressively accusing Lucian of using his mother's death as a shield to dodge responsibility, acting just like a spoiled brat. His white-gloved hand gripped the wooden armrest like he wanted to crush it. He figured locking himself in his room for a year to protest was bad enough, but this time he really crossed the line. Grand Duke Sigmund stared straight into his son's eyes, harshly reprimanding Lucian for treating his own life like cheap garbage and trying to kill himself just to throw a tantrum. Facing that wrath, Lucian felt lost, a million questions popping into his head regarding these savage accusations. The memory of waking up surfaced. He remembered lying on the bed while his servant Hans groveled at his feet, crying his eyes out like the sky was falling. So that was the reason Hans threw such a massive fit and cried his eyes swollen. The kid genuinely thought his master just came back from the dead. Lucien tried to keep his cool, hesitatingly calling out, "Father," and planning to explain this might be one massive misunderstanding. But Sigmund denied him the chance, leaning back in his tall chair and ordering him to confess the pathetic schemes hiding in that tiny brain right this second. He declared this suicide stunt was Lucien's goal from day one, using his own weak hands to execute an attention-grabbing plot. Lucien froze hearing his father mention he swallowed that pile of sleeping pills just to stir up chaos in the family. It clicked. Lucien finally remembered why he had zero memories regarding his own name from his past life. Flashing back 15 years, when Jake's soul was still a regular guard in this mansion, he realized a horrifying truth about his current identity. During boring night shifts, Jake often heard guards and servants gossiping about the Valdek family's pitiful third young master. Those rumors always ended with a grim, heavily covered-up fact. Lucien Valdek actually died that exact same year. Grand Duke Sigmund Valdek, the powerhouse sitting across from him, was notorious for being a cold-blooded tyrant even to his own flesh and blood. He had 4 sons in total, but each came from different mothers, leaving the family's brotherly bonds fragile as glass. In his 10 years working here in his past life, Jake bumped into the other young masters and madams, but never once saw the third son's shadow. He suddenly realized he had absolutely zero memory of ever meeting or hearing any info regarding Lucien's existence. Lucien's mother died early from a severe illness, leaving the kid stranded amidst the vicious hidden power struggles within the Grand Duke's estate. And then Lucien himself, shortly after Jake started guard duty, quietly passed away from undisclosed causes. Back then, Jake simply figured both mother and son shared a tragic fate due to terrible health, unable to survive this brutal family. But now, living inside this very body, he finally peeled back the dark truth behind the pitiful young master's demise. His mother's death combined with his garbage status in the family built up unbearable pressure for a fragile mind, pushing Lucien to seek an out via a lethal dose of sleeping pills. That kid only hoped this extreme move would buy him even a tiny shred of care or attention from his mighty Grand Duke father. But poor Lucien miscalculated. His body, already severely wrecked after a full year locked in a room, couldn't tank the drug's side effects. And as a result, instead of pulling off an attention-grabbing stunt, he took his actual final breath right on his bed, all alone. The current Lucien thought this was a serious headache, considering his father acted so savage toward the son he ignored for an entire year. But standing from the perspective of the glorious Valdek family's head, he had to admit Sigmund's fierce reaction made perfect sense. Even with the title of an Iron Grand Duke, deep down, he was probably feeling deeply hurt and massively disappointed by his son's idiotic move. However, Lucien knew damn well this wasn't the time to stand there feeling empathy or understanding for this cheap father's feelings. He felt like he was balancing on the edge of an abyss when he heard the ironclad, one last time, warning drop from Sigmund's mouth. It was a crystal-clear ultimatum, and Lucien could almost feel the floor cracking under his feet, signaling a nasty end. The vision of a glorious future he just daydreamed about was crumbling right before his eyes, leaving a threatening, bottomless pit. If he spat out even one wrong word right now or failed to satisfy the Grand Duke's ego, it was game over immediately. Best-case scenario, he gets tossed into a harsh, remote monastery to live as a priest, permanently banned from touching power or the outside world ever again. Or worse, he gets exiled to the freezing north, where raging blizzards and bloodthirsty monsters wait to shred anyone who wanders in. Living a life worse than a beggar's, roaming in the bone-chilling cold to escape the jaws of beasts, that was the endgame waiting if he screwed this up. A deep darkness engulfed his mind, but Lucien gritted his teeth, swearing he would never let that joke of a future happen to him. Lucien clenched his jaw, face drenched in sweat thinking about this second chance at life he barely snagged after getting decapitated in his past life. He told himself this priceless future wouldn't get destroyed over petty noble family drama. Taking a deep breath to cool his nerves, Lucien looked his father dead in the eye and spoke. "If father wants me to speak, then I ask for permission to present my case." He kicked off with a heavily apologetic tone, admitting his own sheer stupidity stained the Waldeck family's epic reputation and gave his father endless headaches. Facing the Grand Duke's judgment, Lucien placed a hand on his chest and bowed deeply to offer his father the most genuine apology possible. Steward Edwin stood nearby, dumbstruck hearing the young master declare this was entirely his fault, and he'd swallow the harshest punishment without a single complaint. Sigmund kept his icy expression, figuring apologies couldn't fix shit right now, but he was curious to hear what the kid would say next. The Grand Duke rested his chin on his hand, his razor-sharp gaze scanning his son, wondering if Lucian was secretly thrilled his plan succeeded. Standing in the middle of the massive study, Lucian maintained a proud posture despite the crushing pressure of his father's authority closing in. He firmly declared the past was dead and gone, and wallowing in it was a pointless waste of time. Lucian stepped back, his boots clicking on the stone floor, proclaiming he had no intention of letting this life, freshly dragged back from hell, be chained by the ghosts of the past for another second. His straight posture and unwavering gaze radiated a maturity worlds apart from the third young master's usual cowardice. Lucian looked Sigmund in the eye, begging him to view him not as a Grand Duke, but as a father, and grant him even the smallest shred of encouragement. He cracked a faint smile, a grin both sincere and hiding brilliant calculation to flip this deadly script. Sigmund watched in silence, picturing a child genuinely repenting and a father generously accepting him back. Amidst the room's grandeur, the Grand Duke seemed to weigh whether this was the proper way to handle things right now. A thought flashed in Lucian's mind regarding the blood tie between father and son. Was it strong enough to erase past screw-ups? Steward Edwin stood behind, eyes bulging. He couldn't believe his ears hearing such sharp, persuasive words spilling from Lucian's mouth. The old butler sensed a massive shift in the young master's aura, the guy he always pinned as the family's biggest coward. The sight of Lucian bowing earlier felt like a mask, hiding a fierce soul, quietly rising from the shadows. He wondered if this was actually young Master Lucian, the kid who was scared of his own shadow and never dared hold his head up under pressure. Sigmund stayed glued to his chair, his gaze darkening, making the room's air even more suffocating. Lucian's heart hammered in his chest. He was betting it all on this high-risk psychological gamble with his terrifying father. Sigmund's fingers drummed the armrest, tossing out a remark about the sheer audacity of the son standing before him. He snapped, stating Lucian had some serious guts preaching to him about a father's duties and responsibilities right here. Sigmund admitted he finally lived long enough to watch his weakest son directly challenge him. Lucian kept his cool. He knew he was on the right track to hook the attention of a man who worshipped strength. A cryptic smile crept onto the young master's lips. He knew his performance was hitting the mark. The second Sigmund seemed to cool off. Lucian breathed a huge sigh of relief, sweat pouring down his forehead from the insane tension. He figured that instead of awkwardly bowing, clapping back with a bold, direct confrontation was the smartest play against a guy like the Grand Duke. Sigmund leaned back in his throne-like chair. He respected the spirit of a wild dog baring its fangs fighting back way more than a pack of rats living off reading people's moods. To Grand Duke Waldeck, the reckless, brazen attitude Lucian just flexed proved he actually manned up after brushing with death. Sigmund nodded, deciding to ask Lucian first what his actual endgame was for the near future. His piercing gaze bored into Lucian Waldeck, demanding he lay out his game plan moving forward. Lucian narrowed his eyes with fierce resolve, declaring the first thing on his list was fixing this garbage, frail body of his. Visions of the overwhelming power he craved to control his own destiny flashed through his mind. The image of the commander-in-chief with his armored hand gripping a blazing sword symbolized the soul's ambition to conquer the peak of strength. A savage warrior standing amidst a blood-soaked battlefield was the ultimate goal Lucian aimed for. He firmly stated he planned to study swordsmanship as seriously and methodically as humanly possible. Sigmund looked skeptical hearing his sickly kid demand to learn the sword, but Lucian stuck to his guns about upgrading this paper doll physique first. He shrugged casually, claiming that as long as he ate right, slept well, and grinded hard, everything would work out just fine. Sigmund cracked a rare, satisfied smile, tossing out a compliment for Lucian's smooth, confident speech. Sigmund watched his son in silence, figuring whether this was the truth or just big talk. He'd see the results through the kid's actions soon enough. He turned to the old butler and barked a firm order. "Steward, give him that one more time." Sigmund figured instead of throwing out hollow words of encouragement right now, handing Lucian something tangible would hit way harder. Lucian stood there looking skeptical and confused, unable to guess what the hell that was coming from his father's mouth. The steward bowed respectfully, promising to arrange for the item to arrive instantly per the Grand Duke's orders. A massive question mark popped into the young master's head. He echoed the word that, with a look of heavy doubt about what was coming. The scene outside the mansion got wild, as servants started hauling massive crates inside under the blazing sun. Two guys were busting their guts carrying a heavy-duty wooden chest, promising some insanely valuable loot inside. The chest popped open, revealing an endless stash of shiny gold coins, pearl necklaces, and premium jewelry packed to the brim. While Hans stood by dropping his jaw, losing all his chill, Lucien just found his family's absurd wealth downright hilarious. Watching the caravans loaded with treasure chests in the yard, Lucien realized this was the ultimate flex of a high noble, and that turned out to be a massive allowance. He scooped up the blinding gold coins, internally blown away that this entire mountain of cash was just his monthly stipend. A smug grin plastered across Lucien's face under the gold's glow. He realized with this kind of bank, every crazy plan he had was a go. The vision of brewing an elixir to fully overhaul his trash body felt incredibly real, pushing him to pull the trigger immediately. The Valdec Grand Duke's glass greenhouse came into view, tranquil and vibrant with all sorts of flowers. Sunlight pierced the crystal dome, highlighting a majestic space reserved for the elite. Sigmund Valdec strolled through the garden, trailed by his loyal butler. Wearing a long cape, he carried the commanding presence of a king patrolling his turf. The butler brought up that this used to be the late Grand Duchess's most treasured spot when she was alive. Sigmund listened, his eyes turning slightly somber as he gazed at the flower beds. Sigmund pushed deeper into the garden, his massive back radiating a cold, isolated vibe. The air around them seemed to freeze with every step the master of the house took. Lucien Valdec's image flashed in his mind, a teenager with that unwavering glare. The kid had changed, dropping the usual cowardice for an uncanny sharpness. Sigmund recalled the late wife's silhouette and his young son from years ago. He always assumed their only similarity was their looks, but now he started doubting that. Sigmund's footsteps echoed rhythmically on the stone. He mulled over the drastic evolution of the son he once wrote off as a disgrace. The butler's arm twitched, seemingly sensing the shifted atmosphere after that tense standoff. The silence between the two men dialed up the tension. The butler admitted that in the past, Lucien always acted terrified and dodged every scolding. The little master used to shake like a stray dog in his father's presence. But today marked the first time Sigmund saw that kid dare to look him dead in the eye to state his case. He conceded he might have misjudged his son's potential. Sigmund's face hardened, his piercing gaze locked ahead. Lucien's shift didn't just surprise him, it sparked a sliver of curiosity about the kid's future. The butler wore stark shock on his weather-beaten face. Even he probably didn't expect the Grand Duke to acknowledge Lucien so bluntly. Sigmund smirked, an unpredictable grin. He realized Lucien didn't flinch, a confident swagger he hadn't seen from his third son in ages. The butler bowed in agreement, validating that Lucien indeed showcased a resolute front. That gaze didn't belong to someone just acting to beg for their life. He defended him further, stating Lucien inherently possessed a kind heart and deep thoughts, so sometimes it was just temporary hesitation. After all, the Grand Duke's blood flowed in the young master's veins. Sigmund closed his eyes, sighing heavily with hidden meaning. Whether Lucien truly changed remained to be seen. He didn't buy into fleeting moments easily. Both stopped among the pure white flowers. Sigmund knew the upcoming trials for that kid couldn't be solved with empty talk. The steward reported a new issue requiring his orders. His face showed clear anxiety, bringing up the family's internal drama. A dagger slammed into a sack of gold coins. Even though Lucien's allowance was restored, a chunk of that cash was leaking out suspiciously. Jordi Valdec, the second son, casually burned a letter with a sinister grin. It was obvious he was pulling strings behind the scenes to sabotage and shackle his younger brother. The butler revealed Jordi even fired Lucien's trusted head maid and swapped in his own pawn. This move blatantly exposed his scheme to monitor and control Lucien. Sigmund listened with an icy expression, arms crossed. He fully understood Jordi's jealousy toward Lucien, but letting him run wild like this insulted his own authority. When the butler asked if they should intervene, Sigmund ordered him to leave it be. He wanted to watch how Lucien would handle getting backed into a corner by his own brother. Sunlight bounced off the tranquil lotus pond in the garden. Sigmund viewed this as the price Lucian had to pay for a whole year of living weak and aimless. If Lucian couldn't squash these petty problems himself, he had zero reason to invest any hope in him. Anyone carrying Valdec blood needed to know how to fight to survive. The image of a majestic lion roaring on a cliff symbolized the family's core ideal. Everyone had to kick open the door to their own future. Nobody could do it for them. A few days later, the Valdec mansion still looked glorious under the clear blue sky. But beneath that peace, whispers buzzed about the little master's mysterious moves. The maids huddled up gossiping, wondering if Lucian locked himself in his room again. Their curiosity spread like wildfire down the halls. Hans stood guard at the door, looking dead serious and stressed out. The guy seemed under massive pressure protecting his master's privacy. Hans flinched, his eyes bugging out in shock at something inside the room. The young servant clearly wasn't used to Lucian's bold moves yet. 3 days passed since the allowance got restored and delivered. Lucian and Hans stood before treasure chests packed with loot anyone would kill for. Inside the chests lay gold, silver, jewels, and gleaming gemstone necklaces. A massive fortune, enough for Lucian to execute his wildest schemes. Hans looked at Lucian with awe mixed with anxiety. He knew how much guts it took for his master to snatch this cash from the Grand Duke. Hans thought about the freezing relationship between the father and son all this time. Facing Sigmund was definitely a brutal mental trial for someone as scarred as Lucian. Little Hans couldn't hold back his tears, wiping his face. He believed Lucian was grinding hard to move forward despite carrying so much pain and neglect. Lucian casually flipped gold coins in his hand, the metallic glint reflecting on his face. Hans was still sniffling behind him, looking way more emotional than the boss himself. Without warning, Lucian's eyes flared with dangerous calculation. With this massive capital, anything was possible for his destiny-altering masterplan. He cracked an ambitious grin, gripping the gold coins like he was grasping raw power. The treasure's glow highlighted the eerie sharpness of a guy reborn from the grave. To fully overhaul this frail body, Lucian knew he needed the legendary potion called Nectar. He bet everything that with his future knowledge, brewing it was a piece of cake. The room had morphed into a chemistry lab with all sorts of curved flasks and brewing gear. White smoke billowed from potions boiling violently on the desk. Lucian wiped the sweat off his brow, locking his intense gaze on the brewing process. This required absolute precision. One tiny screw-up would wreck the whole batch. He shot a glance at the door, secretly gratting Hans's loyalty as the kid maintained a tight watch. This loyalty was a key chess piece Lucian needed to keep in his pocket. Lucian stared hard at the brewing gear a noble brat should never have touched. Ancient books, test tubes, and half-burnt candles cluttered the desk, creating a heavy alchemist vibe. Under the full moon reflecting on the lake, moonweed glowed with a mystic aura. This was an insanely pricey herb since it only grew under moonlight, keeping its value sky-high. This weed was so rare that nobody had even figured out its most basic uses yet. Despite blowing his entire allowance to buy it, Lucian knew this play was worth every penny. Lucian calmly ordered Hans to go buy up even more moonweed while they still could. He knew everyone else viewed this as the lunatic behavior of a spoiled brat burning money. Sacks stuffed with moonweed piled up in the room, emitting a soft glow. Right now, they looked like useless bags of dried grass, but Lucian saw a hidden gold mine. He narrowed his eyes, having already calculated the future down to the wire. In just 1 year, the tables would flip, and everything would play out exactly as he predicted. This herb's price wouldn't just jump tenfold, it would skyrocket over 20 times its current value. A massive medicinal fever was about to explode, turning these grass sacks into pure gold. Lucian leaned back on a pile of moonweed, soaking in the vibe of a guy holding the future in his hands. He spread his arms wide, ready to embrace the colossal jackpot coming his way. A ruthlessly ambitious grin surfaced on the Valdec young master's face. His golden eyes sparked with thrill, picturing the losers who looked down on him soon begging on their knees for a handful of weed. He stroked his chin, pondering the sheer recklessness of past alchemists. To score monumental achievements, they sacrificed a ton, even their lives, for untested experiments. The moonweed sprigs hung suspended to dry, prepping for the crucial extraction phase. Back then, not even the creators knew for sure if that thing would work. The ingredients dropped into the scorching crucible, unleashing thick plumes of smoke. Rumors said they hoarded every stalk of moonweed in the Empire just for one single brew. This was the ultimate gamble of a lifetime, a move dictating the fate of everyone involved. Lucian craved the birth of a power defying human comprehension. Guided by his skilled and daring hands, an unprecedented miracle drug made its debut. Lucian stared at the shimmering pink vial, knowing it would send shockwaves through the Valdec Empire. They managed to forge nectar, hailed as the drink of the gods. Lucian raised the vial to eye level, feeling the heat and surging power trapped inside the glass. The moment he popped the cork, a crimson mist billowed out like phantom smoke. Alchemists used to face death threats for blasphemy when they named a potion after the gods. But the second its effects were proven, the backlash vanished, replaced by endless hype. That red liquid packed the potential to rewrite human destiny itself. Lucian flashed a cocky smile, watching the potion glow in the lab's darkness. He secured the forgotten formula, the key to unlocking a brand new chapter for his life. An ironclad rule dominated for 1,000 years. A warrior's talent was locked in at birth. A red-hot brand on the back symbolized the chains of fate nobody could break. Innate nature is destiny, and a person's body will never change. That was the brutal verdict on human limits. Heavy chains tangled together, representing the barriers stopping humanity from pushing past their limits. No matter the grind, a talentless hack stayed a useless pawn under nature's yoke. But in the dead of night, a blazing star appeared, signaling the collapse of those outdated laws. A fresh spark of hope flared up, strong enough to shatter the chains of prejudice. The one thing capable of smashing every natural law was none other than nectar. A phantom silhouette stretched and awakened, carrying a mystic power to overhaul both body and soul. Just downing this juice allowed even those with zero talent to morph into master swordsmen. Lucian stared at the lavish ceiling, silently praising the knowledge he dragged over from his past life. He gently swirled the pink vial, eyeing the liquid sloshing inside. Even if this was just a mass-produced knockoff lacking the original's kick, it was still a priceless artifact. For a wrecked, weak body like this, nothing beat nectar to kickstart a rebirth. Lucian knew he was rolling the dice, but this was his only ticket to the top. His gaze turned ice-cold and fierce as he locked eyes with his reflection. "Consider yourself lucky, young master," Lucian thought, referencing the original soul of this body. The icon of a snake coiled around an arrow, and a flask brought back memories of a chaotic era when alchemists were hunted down. Because they held the nectar formula that could flip the power scales, they paid in blood. Thanks to that massacre, the recipe vanished from the grid for centuries. But Lucian's golden eyes flashed with raw confidence, because he was the sole survivor holding that secret. A blazing dawn broke over the Valdec estate. Golden sunlight washed over the rooftops, announcing the start of a game-changing day. From the castle's towering window, a silhouette stood watching in silence. It was Lucian Valdec, fresh out of his intense isolation. Hans, the loyal servant, paced frantically in front of the door. He had been guarding this spot for God knows how long, his gut twisting with anxiety over his master's health. Hans's face dripped with sweat, his eyes restless. He desperately wanted to bust in, but Lucian Valdec's orders strictly forbade any interruptions. Out of nowhere, the heavy doors slammed open, light from inside spilling out. Lucian Valdec stepped out looking like a whole new man, composed and oozing authority. Hans jumped out of his skin, jaw dropping in shock. Catching sight of his master, he rushed over with a teary face, unable to believe his eyes. The little servant burst into loud sobs, yelling to ask if Lucian Valdec knew how long he was stuck in there. His cries echoed down the hall, spilling out all his pent-up panic. Hans rubbed his eyes and sniffled, pouring out his fears. He tried calling out but got ghosted, and he didn't have the guts to break the "do not enter" rule. Lucian Valdec just stood there, quietly watching his loyal servant cry a river. He probably didn't expect Hans to throw such a wild fit after a few hours apart. A calm smile graced Lucian Valdec's lips. His golden eyes glowed with understanding, miles away from the original owner's classic cowardice. Lucian Valdec's eyes ran deep and packed serious heat. These weren't the eyes of a frail teen anymore. They belonged to a guy holding a massive power source. Hans stared blankly at his master, sensing something felt off. He stuttered Lucian Valdec's name, almost like he needed to verify the guy standing in front of him. The servant glued his eyes to his master's every move, full of doubt. His gut screamed this was definitely Lucian Valdec, but at the same time it felt like a total stranger. Lucien Valdec mentally noted Hans was sharp for picking up on this rapid upgrade. He flashed a cryptic smile, knowing he couldn't hide this from his right-hand man. Hans just stood there looking dumbfounded, finger on his lips, swimming in confusion. He stuck with his master for ages, so even a micro-change was enough to rock his world. Lucien Valdec pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the core changes from deep within. He knew this physical shell needed time and fuel to max out, but his soul was good to go. Lucien's physique was already morphing under the silk shirt. Even if he still looked like a teen, a brutal revolution in raw power was raging inside. The vision of his heart and mana circuits blazing brightly inside Lucien Valdec. A pure stream of energy flooded his system, shattering every normal human limit. Lucien Valdec held his head high, his eyes flashing pure, hardcore confidence. He felt this body's innate talent vibing perfectly with his past life's grind. Every step he took rang out with heavy authority on the stone floor. Lucien Valdec knew he held infinite potential, the kind of cheat code any genius would kill for. He smirked, fully satisfied with the results of his training session. Everything was falling right into place, and now it was time to move the next piece. Lucien Valdec stood tall before the king peace symbol on a chessboard. His potential now mirrored an ultimate king, ready to dictate the entire kingdom's fate. This power had enough juice to rival the legends who flipped the world upside down. Lucien knew he wasn't just some minor noble, he was the game changer. An arrogant smirk broke out as he ran the numbers for the future. If he played his cards right, he'd easily crush his mercenary prime within a single year. Lucien turned to call Hans, who was still looking like a deer in headlights. He realized Hans's loyalty was the exact reason he scored this insane opportunity. He grabbed Hans by the shoulders, making the kid jump out of his skin. Lucien laid it out. In his world, rewards and punishments were always crystal clear. Lucien's eyes turned ice cold and menacing. He stared dead into Hans's eyes, gearing up to drop a deal he was only going to offer once. Lucien Valdec's face darkened with a wicked, predatory grin. He told Hans to scrape together everything he owned, sell his underwear if he had to, and bet it all on him. Then he busted out a loud, maniacal laugh. Lucien Valdec flat-out guaranteed he'd pave a path of roses for Hans straight to the top. He struck a dramatic pose under the palace's shimmering lights. The booming laughter and epic declaration left Hans paralyzed, sweating bullets under the pressure. "I'm honestly jealous of you, Hans," Lucien thought, staring up at the sky. He marveled that back in his day, there was no noble as legendary as him around. Hans just stood there completely lost, a massive question mark hovering over his head. He had zero clue what possessed his young master to spit out something that insane. A week later, the scene shifted to a chill, scenic forest. Sunlight sliced through the lush green canopy, dialing in a super relaxing vibe. Lucien Valdec took a breezy stroll through the woods, while Hans trailed behind, still shell-shocked from last week's stunt. The young master was taking time to soak in his new life. He stretched out, feeling fantastic, whistling an upbeat tune. Living as a noble turned out to be way easier and smoother than he ever imagined. Lucien Valdec's face screamed satisfaction as he caught the cool breeze. He wondered if life could seriously be this absurdly easy. He thought back to getting served massive, top-tier feasts like clockwork. Fancy dishes just spawned in front of him without him lifting a finger. His room was always scrubbed spotless by the maids even while he was half asleep. Every little detail was handled on site, catered to the millimeter. Even his plush bed was always prepped for him to crash. Sinking into warm blankets was an ultra-luxurious feeling he never tasted before. Lucien couldn't help but laugh remembering his brutal past. Back then, starving was a daily routine, but now the script was entirely flipped. He clenched his fists, feeling the power surging through his muscles. Thanks to this insane VIP treatment, he could focus 100% on recovering and buffing his stats. Lucien reached into his shirt, pulling out something that was always on his mind. It was time to face another heavy issue weighing on his brain. A crappy doodle of Jake from his guard days. Lucien Valdec pondered his past self's existence in this current timeline. After pressing the guard captain, he confirmed nobody named Jake ever dropped an application here. Lucien Valdec threw on a cloak to secretly scope out his old guard post. Now, that spot was occupied by a total stranger. He clasped his hands in deep thought. Lucien Valdec figured this was actually a win, since bumping into his past self would just throw him off his game. Lucian's face flushed with awkwardness, sweating hard. He admitted he lacked the guts to face his past self. He'd probably die of cringe. Behind him, Hans was shivering with anxiety seeing his boss freeze up. Lucian was still lost in his thoughts, mashing up the past and present. Hearing Hans call out, Lucian calmly turned his head. His gaze now carried the iron will of a veteran who survived 100 battles. Hans fidgeted, stuttering to ask if the young master seriously planned to step foot in there. Fear painted the servant kid's face as he stared at the training hall. Right in front of them stood the massive training hall, looming in the shadows. Hans brought up how Lucian Valdek used to say he hated this place so much he'd never come back. Lucian tilted his head, playing dumb, asking if he actually said that. This deadpan reaction shocked Hans so hard his jaw hit the floor. Hans teared up, bringing up how second young master Jordi Valdek used to torture his boss in those training sessions. He didn't want Lucian suffering that nightmare ever again. Seeing Hans's reaction, Lucian got a pretty good picture of his garbage past. He knew swordplay was a mandatory skill for a Grand Duke's bloodline. A memory flashed. Teenage Lucian Valdek collapsed on the floor, battered and bleeding. A cold wooden sword pointed right at him like a vicious threat. Under the guise of sword training, they drilled the fear of violence deep into his brain. Those ruthless beatings turned Lucian into a terrified coward. The dark silhouette of his tormentor stood tall, feeding off the weak's misery. It was the perfect setup to ensure he'd never dare go near the training hall again. Back in the present, Lucian Valdek looked up at the lush canopy under the clear sky. He calmed Hans down, telling him not to stress so hard. Everything would be fine. He firmly stated all that awful crap was in the past now. Hans looked at his boss with hopeful eyes, though still a bit spooked by this call. Lucian strode forward with absolute confidence. Every step he took now packed the weight of a fresh, hardcore willpower. Flashing a confident grin, Lucian told Hans to trust him and follow his lead. The little servant just nodded, overwhelmed with awe at his boss's glow-up. Inside the sprawling training hall, the air was thick with the clash of weapons and soldiers screaming. The towering stone pillars and banners cranked up the hardcore vibe. Someone's boots clicked slowly against the stone floor. It seemed Lucian Valdek's entrance had hijacked the attention of everyone in the room. Two guards couldn't hide their shock seeing the third young master stroll up here himself. They scrambled to report this rare sighting to the higher-ups. A middle-aged guy rocking a fancy mustache squinted from afar. Hendrik wondered what kind of scheme the brat was cooking up to show his face here. Hendrik's sharp eyes flashed a dangerous blue glare. He cracked a sinister grin, figuring this was the perfect chance to teach Lucian a lesson. He ordered his grunt to report this straight to second young master Jordi Valdek. Meanwhile, he'd roll out the red carpet to welcome our young master himself. Hendrik twirled his mustache, cockily guaranteeing he'd make Lucian Valdek regret it before the guy even reached him. A toxic plan was brewing in his head. Lucian stood in the center, resting his chin on his hand, scanning the room looking highly satisfied. He figured this setup blew past his expectations scale-wise. Weapon racks loaded with polished steel hyped Lucian up. Having an endless weapon stash to grind without worrying about breaking gear was straight-up heaven. The massive open space let him pull off the wildest moves without feeling boxed in. This was the prime spot to revive his peak skills. Admiring the epic architecture, Lucian Valdek couldn't help but marvel at his family's deep pockets. Hogging a massive facility like this all to himself was beyond luxurious. Standing mid-hall, a wave of nostalgia hit him thinking about his old crew. Lucian thought if his old squad had a spot like this to train, a lot more of them would have survived. Heavy footsteps approaching from behind made Lucian Valdek and Hans jump. A figure was closing in carrying zero friendly vibes. Hendrik strutted over with a snobby look, spitting pure sarcasm. He acted super shocked to see the third young master grow the balls to show up here again. He painted a vivid picture of how Lucian ran for his life after a session with Jordi a year ago. Hans shook like a leaf behind his boss, while Lucian kept an ice-cold face. Hendrik sneered, comparing Lucian back then to a little lamb running from a wolf. His eyes screamed disrespect for the young master he viewed as pathetic. He glanced at Hans, who was gripping his shirt tight in terror. Hendrik asked if that was why Lucian still looked so horrified of this place. Hans stared at the floor, sweating buckets from Hendrik's pressure. He mocked Lucian for dragging a servant kid into a warrior's sanctuary like it was a total joke. He pulled off a super fake bow and introduced himself as Hendrik. The knight crossed his arms, acting incredibly arrogant right to his master's face. Hendrik got all in Lucien Valdec's face, asking if he still remembered the posture training session from a year ago. His gaze oozed provocation and disrespect. The past flashed back, Lucien Valdec trembling while gripping a wooden sword, eyes welling with tears out of fear. It was a humiliating memory he hauled around for way too long. Hendrik burst out laughing, calling it a highly entertaining and unforgettable time. He gave zero shits about his master's presence, treating him like a literal toy. Lucien Valdec's face went dark, a cryptic grin forming in the shadows. He thought, "Let's see what tricks this old bastard tries to pull," getting ready to strike back. Dark, sharp shadows covered Lucien Valdec's face, making his blazing golden eyes pop with defiance. He smirked a dark smile, betting this upcoming clash was going to be fire. Knights hailed as the ultimate embodiment of honor and loyalty, a top-tier idol everyone looked up to. Usually, kids with noble blood got drilled in combat and manners from day one to earn this title. Only when they racked up epic achievements on the battlefield or cleared brutal missions did their talent get the respect it deserved. And when the Lord officially knighted them, they finally felt their worth and reached their peak existence. But Lucien Valdec saw right through the bullshit. At the end of the day, these knights were just attacked dogs wearing expensive collars. That was why his eyes always carried that quiet, calculating disrespect. Fundamentally, they were bound to respect the Lord who handed them wealth and honor. And obviously, they had to respect anyone sharing his bloodline. But look at the sheer arrogance of this old man Hendrik, twirling his mustache and acting all high and mighty, treating the young master like dirt. Lucien's previous garbage tier status in the family was the main reason this knight dared to act up. A glowing chain materialized around Hendrik's neck, proving he was just a pawn getting yanked around. The guy pulling the strings was Jordi Valdec. Leaning on his older brother's shadow gave Hendrik the guts to flex on Lucien. Lucien's gaze turned frosty. He figured if this was his old world, he'd have way more extreme ways to handle this old geezer. He pictured using his special training methods to re-educate the old man's delusional brain. In that vision, Hendrik was tied to a target board, screaming his lungs out while Lucien practiced throwing knives at his helmet. But Lucien knew damn well Grand Duke Sigmund Valdec wouldn't sit around if he caused a scene like that. Knights were the family's core muscle. Punishing them without going through the official channels would just spark pointless drama. He cleared his throat, telling himself now wasn't the time to go all out. Lucien announced he'd be dropping by here way more often, aiming to learn swordsmanship skills. Hendrik gave him a mocking look, repeating the third young master's request to learn the sword. He burst out laughing, sarcastically praising Lucien's sense of humor since asking to learn swordplay at this point was way too late. Hendrik stepped closer, talking down to him that crossing 15 meant it was game over. He claimed swordplay was a mix of secret arts and legacy passed down by ancestors, not something you just pick up because you want to. Merely copying the moves could trigger an awakening and massively level up the body via ancient wisdom. However, Hendrik insisted that only mattered when the body's mana pathways were still open. And according to him, those pathways shut down at 16, so grinding now was just a waste of breath. He threw in a savage jab. Statting swordplay without awakening was just a soulless dance. Hendrik leaned into Lucien's ear, mocking him to take this chance to become the Empire's #1 dancer instead. The surrounding knights hit Lucien with icy glares, packing zero respect. Hendrik even pitched that if he hated dancing, he could kill time gardening. Lucien stood with his back turned, silent amidst the trash talk. The knight figured everyone had a role that fit them best. Hendrik secretly celebrated seeing him freeze, assuming he had shut Lucien up for good. But in reality, Lucien knew the whole mana shuts down at 16 logic was a blatant lie. It was a level of stupidity easily exposed. Lucien figured he could play dumb right now to hit his bigger endgame. The visual of a little lamb crying its eyes out popped up, matching how Hendrik viewed Lucien as a crushed weakling. Through his eyes, Lucien was just a tiny worm shaking in fear, too scared to even move. He was flexing the exact pathetic nature of his past year just to make Hendrik drop his guard. He was basically a roasted chicken waiting to get carved up. Lucien turned on his acting chops, hands trembling as he grabbed his collar and called Hendrik's name with heavy hesitation. He questioned why his info didn't match, since he knew mana pathways only closed at 25. He looked at Hendrik, waiting for an answer. Lucian stared at the floor, smoothly dragging his brother Jordy into the crossfire by asking if Jordy backed that logic too. Hendrik waved his hand with sheer confidence, cementing that it was common sense even Jordy vouched for. He thought he put a permanent lock on the youngest brother's mouth. He backed it up one more time, adding that Lucian's older brother said the exact same thing. He had zero clue he just walked into a lethal verbal trap. In a flash, Lucian flipped the script. He suddenly grabbed Hans's head and screamed in pure despair that the Valdek family was done for. Lucian randomly grabbed Hans's head and shook it, claiming the kid definitely thought the same. Hans turned pale, clueless as to why he got dragged into this mess. He clutched his head, screaming tragically, cursing Hendrik's ignorance on something even street dogs knew. Lucian furiously asked how a guy his age could make such a disastrous screw-up. He kept acting his heart out, declaring countless talents got robbed of their shot just because of that garbage info. "Oh, tears are blinding my eyes," Lucian wailed dramatically. Hendrik stood frozen, unable to process what he was hearing. Lucian kept roasting his empty brain, while Hans remained clueless in the back. Lucian swatted Hans's hand away, telling him not to interfere because this was an insult to the family. He stressed that if the knight's words were true, this was a massive crisis. He got right in Hendrik's face with a sinister smirk and blazing eyes. He asked softly, but packed with threats if the guy was actually trying to scam him. "You dare scam the son of the Lord you serve?" Lucian backed the knight into a corner with brutal words. A suffocating pressure exploded from Lucian, sending shivers down both Hendrik and Hans's spines. Hendrik sweat bullets, frantically denying he ever tried to deceive the young master. He started shaking, realizing the situation just nose-dived into a worst-case scenario. Lucian suddenly stood up straight, telling the old guy to forget what he just said. He made an excuse that he just slipped up out of shock from this insane situation. Behind that innocent act was Jake's ruthless ghost glaring at Hendrik with a manic grin. He stated a Valdek knight would never pull such a scumbag move. Hendrik gulped, hastily backing up that it was obvious. Lucian nodded, looking highly satisfied, like everything was going exactly as planned. But right after, his tone turned dead serious, claiming this wasn't something to brush off. His eyes locked onto the knight, who was now shaking like a leaf. "Let me school you." Lucian's smile right now was pure nightmare fuel. A hardcore message dropped like a warning about the hellish fallout for talking trash to his face. Lucian scanned the training grounds, asserting Hendrik still didn't grasp how severe this was. He said if the guy only wanted to humiliate him, he would have let it slide. Hendrik stuttered, clueless about what Lucian's words actually meant. Lucian launched back into acting mode, spreading his arms and taking all the blame for wasting time and forgetting his duties. He acted devastated, asking how he could ever blame the old man for that. He was playing the forgiving guy just to set up his mental finisher. He switched tones, claiming a knight and his brother feeding false info was unforgivable. He argued it tanked the Grand Duchy's talent recruitment. The knights in the back started whispering over Lucian's heavy words. He emphasized this flaw would crack the Valdek family's military power. Hans watched his boss with eyes full of awe and emotion. Lucian wrapped it up, stating this directly threatened the people's safety in their territory. As someone carrying the Valdek name, he claimed the right to be furious over this. Deep down, Lucian was flexing super hard over his flawless acting. He turned to Hendrik, asking if he finally got how massive this screw-up was. The knight just stood there taking the heat under the young master's pressure. Lucian pointed right at Hendrik's chest, telling him to brace himself for what was coming. He declared he was reporting this to his father and demanding an internal purge. His gaze was so freezing it made everyone's hair stand on end. Hendrik was officially panicking. He couldn't figure out why the kid who used to shake at his name was blowing this up so much. In his eyes, the image of the weak, little lamb young master was dead and gone, replaced by a massive black wolf with glowing eyes towering over Hendrik. The old man realized he messed with the wrong guy. A set of noble hands rocking a blazing red ruby ring twitched, signaling a heavy hitter entering the chat. Footsteps echoed as Jordy Valdek showed up, demanding to know what the racket was about. Seeing his savior, Hendrik's face lit up with hope. The knight stuttered Geordie's name in a mix of terror and extreme relief. Lucian gave a slight smirk, thinking this guy's timing was absolute perfection for his master plan. Geordie Valdec closed in with an ice-cold face, spitting Lucian's name like a toxic greeting. He was the Valdec family's second son. Geordie Valdec strolled into the yard, carrying the swagger of a true aristocrat. Spotting his boss, Hendrik scrambled over, sweating buckets, ready to make excuses for the mess. Hendrik stuttered hard, trying to justify how he just got played like a fiddle by Lucian. But Geordie just threw a hand up to shut him up, refusing to hear another trash excuse. He smirked with a hidden agenda, telling Hendrik to save his breath. Geordie leaned into the knight's ear, coldly stating he watched that entire pathetic comedy show with his own eyes. He roasted Hendrik for letting a brat run circles around him, calling it a massive disappointment. Geordie grabbed Hendrik's shoulder, warning him to keep his face straight in front of the crowd. Geordie glared at Hendrik, warning the old man never to put him in a tough spot in public again. Geordie casually walked toward Lucian and Hans, making the air instantly heavy. Hans shook like a leaf behind his boss, sensing the rage boiling inside Geordie. A razor-sharp glare swept past, packed with calculation and zero brotherly love for Lucian. This was Geordie Valdec, the second young master, always hyped as the poster boy for traditional nobility. To buff his power and clash with the eldest son, he didn't hesitate to recruit capable outsiders into his ranks. If he spotted anyone useful, he'd pull every trick to recruit them and flip the power board. Lucian flashed a fake smile, taking the lead to greet his respected older brother. He casually asked how Geordie was doing, acting like they were best buddies. Geordie side-eyed his little brother, calling him a fool and asking what the hell that stunt was all about. He claimed he watched the whole thing, missing zero details of the clash between Lucian and Hendrik. Then he accused Lucian of dragging the Valdec name through the mud with his childish antics. Lucian kept playing dumb, throwing on a clueless face to ask exactly what he did to ruin their rep. Geordie launched into a moral speech, stating Hendrik messed up by being away from the front lines too long, but Lucian was way more out of line. He stressed Hendrik couldn't dodge the blame for using his name to spark this chaos. However, he announced he wouldn't punish Hendrik, honoring the blood and sweat the old guy poured out for the Valdec family. He shot Lucian a look of pure disgust, dropping a loaded line, "Unlike you." Geordie pointed right in Lucian's face, mocking a guy who ditched sword training for having the nerve to roast a veteran knight. He called out Lucian Valdec's name, loudly schooling him to respect the guys guarding their turf. Lucian looked up at his brother, secretly praising the guys' acting chops. They were definitely top tier. Geordie turned to the crowd, hyping up the knights as the absolute backbone keeping the Valdec family alive. He apologized to the knights on Lucian's behalf for the drama, smoothly dumping all the blame on the immature child. A winning smirk crossed Geordie's face as he promised special care for his idiot brother. Lucian read Geordie like a book, realizing this brother's brain was sharp and full of dirty tricks. He recalled the insults he just threw at Hendrik, realizing Geordie masterfully weaponized them to strike back. Not only did he fuel the knight's hate for Lucian, but Geordie also flexed his own rep in front of his crew. "All right, if you want to play the good brother, I'll ride this out till the end," Lucian thought. Lucian clicked his tongue, thinking his brother's psychological manipulation was legit. He suddenly switched gears, admitting there was just a pointless misunderstanding between him and Hendrik. Lucian clutched his chest, looking moved, loudly thanking Geordie for generously dropping such valuable lessons on him. Hans almost passed out hearing Lucian bring up how he called Hendrik's head a hat rack or an empty shell. Veins popped on Geordie's neck. He sensed something super off about Lucian's hyper-sincere attitude. Lucian yelled so the whole yard could hear, praising his brother's massive mercy for enlightening him. He even told Hans to jot down these golden words on top-tier silk for future generations, leaving everyone frozen in shock. Lucian plotted to use this very stunt to wipe out his past weakling image and cement his status in front of the knights. A sinister grin crossed Geordie's face. He believed he had everything resting in the palm of his hand. Right then, Lucian busted out a manic, arrogant laugh that left everyone paralyzed in shock. He casually asked Geordie if he was free to go, treating his threats like dead air. Lucian stepped right up to Geordie, whispering that standing next to each other any longer wasn't doing either of them any favors. Jordy ground his teeth in rage. He couldn't believe his cowardly brother had the balls to stare him down and demand to leave. Lucian's gaze turned razor-sharp, quietly asking his brother if he happened to forget something highly critical. He reminded Jordy that the old man, the Grand Duke, was currently watching their every single move from up high. Lucian smirked, saying he had nothing to lose, but Jordy was a different story, then casually took his silence as a green light to bounce. He casually waved goodbye to his beloved brother Jordy and quickly dragged Hans out of the yard. While Hans looked pale as a ghost from terror, Lucian felt like a total boss, rushing the kid to get the hell out of there fast. Hendrik nervously watched Lucian walk away, then timidly checked out Jordy standing there like a statue. Knight Hendrik asked if letting Lucian walk was cool, but shut up instantly when Jordy's face darkened with killer intent. Jordy's rage flared up, radiating a horrifying pressure that made the knights shake in their boots. The scene cut to the quiet garden inside the castle, where afternoon sun peeked through the lush leaves. Lucian and Hans walked down the dirt path, the only sound being their steady footsteps. Hans was still reeling from what just went down, constantly shooting his boss anxious looks. The kid finally gathered the guts to ask if everything was really okay, after crossing the second young master directly. Hans reminded Lucian he knew Master Jordy's personality better than anyone. The kid teared up, convinced an arrogant guy like Jordy would never let this humiliation slide. Hans started visualizing himself getting dragged off by the mustache knight for punishment, but Lucian told him to chill out. A memory of Jake's past life surfaced. He remembered the garbage feeling of serving under incompetent bosses. Jake sat in the dark, bitterly realizing those guys loved blowing things out of proportion, then playing dumb so their underlings took the heat. Back to the present, Lucian smiled softly, guaranteeing those nightmare scenarios would never happen again. Hans looked at his master with teary eyes, his heart feeling weirdly warm under Lucian's protection. Lucian reached out like he was pulling his servant up. He knew Hans suffered a ton because of his past screw-ups. He seriously stated that when a boss acts like an idiot, the loyal underlings end up paying the heaviest price. Hans teared up, feeling the genuine empathy from the young master he gave everything to serve. Lucian looked Hans dead in the eye, seriously dropping an honorable promise for both their futures. Hans held his breath waiting, sensing a massive shift in his young boss's aura. He promised from now on he'd never let his dumb moves get his crew disrespected or left shaking in fear again. He grabbed Hans's hand as proof, pledging to protect his people at all costs. Brilliant sunshine wrapped around the castle, promising a wild new chapter packed with drama. The duo headed deep into the lavish mansion, making their way to Lucian's annex. Stepping inside, Lucian felt it was super weird that this place was dead quiet after the massive blowout at the yard. He knew damn well Jordy wasn't the type to just sit there taking a public roasting without throwing a counterpunch. Lucian crushed the financial notice in his hand, muttering, "Called it, he's not gonna let us catch a break." His face hardened with rage, seeing the petty tricks his brother pulled to hit him in the wallet. Hans was just as pissed, screaming that this was way out of line and flat-out unacceptable. Lucian asked Hans if he was ready to declare war on that scheming brother together. Lucian roared in fury, "How dare he touch my allowance? This is going too far." Hans yelled right back, full of frustration, "And my hard-earned salary too." Lucian held the envelope, everything kicked off from the highly suspicious budget plan he just got. Today was supposed to be the day he stocked up on moonweed and essentials, the day his account finally got topped up. Right, normally everything should have gone smooth as butter. But the second he opened the letter, his smile froze as an unbelievable detail smacked him in the face. He dropped the paper on the floor in shock, the room's air instantly turning suffocating. The budget summary was brutal. Lucian's allowance got slashed by 75%, and Hans's pay took a 30% hit. Lucian immediately spotted Jordy's fingerprints all over this. The guy was trying to starve him financially. He knew embezzling family funds was a massive crime, yet Jordy had the guts to pull it off through a planted maid. Lucian and Hans marched down the hall toward the main lobby. The young master's energy made even Hans nervous. He figured the only reason his brother could pull this insane stunt was because of his own trash defense system. Lucian's eyes turned icy revisiting the past. Ever since his mother, The third Duchess died, the mansion slipped out of control. Back then, drowning in depression, Lucian irresponsibly dumped the budget management on someone else. That was Dana, the old head maid who busted her back taking care of him for ages. But the person standing in front of him wasn't Dana. It was a new head maid shooting him a cunning, defiant look. Jenny, rocking long braided red hair and freckles, flashed a fake smile seeing her boss roll up. She casually introduced herself as Jenny, the new head maid stepping in for Dana. Dripping with sarcasm, Jenny claimed she wanted to say hi earlier, but it seemed the young master never planned on leaving his room. She touched her lips, mockingly asking if his endless, wild phase was finally over. Hands couldn't cap his rage at that disrespect, yelling at her to watch her mouth when talking to the young master. Lucian waved his hand to chill Hands out, telling him to stay frosty because her roast about his past was actually on point. He cut the fake pleasantries, wanting to jump straight to the boss fight without wasting time. Lucian gripped the budget sheet tight, a terrifying silence choking the room, making everyone hold their breath. He looked Jenny dead in the eye, ready to drop direct questions to shatter her little act. Lucian shoved the budget in Jenny's face, demanding if she drafted this insane plan herself. A smug grin flashed across Jenny's face. She wasn't shaken by her boss's rage at all. She casually owned up to writing it, laughing and asking if he dragged her here just over some pocket change. Jenny made excuses, saying since the young master ghosted his duties and handed over the reins, she was just doing her job. She even acted shocked and hurt, getting grilled this hard despite claiming she worked her tail off. Jenny tilted her chin, stating this was a job the young master should have handled himself from day one. Lucian narrowed his eyes at the paper. He knew she was using his past screw-ups as a meat shield for embezzlement. He glanced around the fancy room, admitting her point about his slacking was dead right. However, Lucian stepped closer, stating there was still one massive plot hole she couldn't explain away. Lucian pointed out the bulk of the extra cash the Duke sent got distributed properly to bump up the maid's pay. Looking at the maids behind her, he said that raise was well-deserved to make up for their grind. But his eyes turned to ice as he locked onto one specific name on the list. Why was Hans's name aggressively crossed out and his pay slashed instead of getting a bump like everyone else? Jenny faked a panic, passing it off as a tiny typo because she was drowning in mansion duties. She turned and demanded the other maids back up her story about how insanely hard she was working lately. The maids stood there terrified, not daring to breathe a word to the young master under Jenny's silent threats. They awkwardly nodded to confirm Miss Jenny was drowning in work, trying to defuse the bomb. Lucian locked eyes on them, clearly feeling their fear and blind obedience to the new head maid. He sighed, realizing this whole sloppy act was just a dirty trick to flex on him and Hans. Lucian decided to turn his back and walk away, telling Hans to follow, leaving the kids stunned by what looked like throwing in the towel. Internally, he mapped it out. This body is mine, but the hands and feet are taking orders from someone else. Lucian's footsteps halted at the door, the air instantly turning thick and heavy. He paused, coldly dropping one last message for the head maid, hoping she'd weigh her answer carefully. Lucian's razor-sharp eyes bored into Jenny, interrogating if she actually knew who her true master was. Jenny didn't flinch. She flashed a defiant smile and casually said she'd run that question by Lord Geordie. The scene shifted to dark, damp streets, where Lucian's ruthless mindset started taking real shape. He told himself rotting tissue and tumors had to get amputated, or the body wouldn't survive. Standing in front of a trashy bar with a busted sign, Lucian felt his own heart rotting from the traitors inside. Lucian and Hans walked in wearing heavy cloaks. Hans was still wondering how a chill fishing trip landed them in a dump like this. Lucian scanned the booze and smoke-filled room, while Hans started panicking, realizing what this place actually was. Inside was a chaotic underground fight club, where bloodthirsty brawlers traded blows while the crowd screamed and placed bets. The sound of heavy hits echoed. The hyped-up crowd roared for a deathmatch right on the stage. Under the hood, Lucian smirked, asking Hans if he could feel the vibe of this place. He confidently stated this was the ultimate fishing spot to hook a massive catch for his master plan. Lucian's boots clicked on the wooden floor as he marched straight to the bar, catching the wiping bartender's attention. The bartender coldly told them to beat it, claiming a rough joint like this wasn't for kids looking to mess around. Without a word, Lucien slammed a heavy coin pouch on the counter. The clink of metal instantly flipped the bartender's attitude. He pushed back his hood, wondering why a fake casino acted so picky about its customers. Lucien revealed his face with a manic grin and glowing eyes, asking if the bartender planned on serving this VIP. Lucien thought back to Jenny's smile and knew it was bad news. He understood she wasn't just a basic head maid, and rushing to pack her up right now was a massive gamble. Inside the flashy Valdec mansion, political cards were being dealt. Lucien locked Jenny in as the first boss he had to crush to hijack this family. Turned out Jenny was the daughter of Geordie's childhood wet nurse. That deep connection made touching her a minefield. One slip-up would blow things out of proportion. Watching the servants kiss up, Lucien sighed. He realized the system inside his own crib was way more chaotic and corrupt than he thought. He hit up a high-roller casino where stiff noble rules got traded for raw instinct and reckless bets. An eager waiter greeted him, but Lucien was gunning for a way bigger target. Lucien's sharp golden eyes scoped the casino like a hunter tracking prey. He bet his father, the Grand Duke, was watching from the shadows to see how he'd clean up this mess. The Grand Duke stood silently by the window, his back radiating absolute power. To him, fixing house drama was the real ultimate test for Lucien. He casually sipped his wine, his dark eyes waiting to see what the kid everyone labeled a total failure could pull off. An invisible pressure weighed down on Lucien's every move. Back at the casino, Lucien lounged in his armchair rocking real gentleman swagger. If this was a test, he was bringing his past lives a game to ace it. Cards and colorful chip stacks crowded the polished wooden table. The mind games kicked off, and Lucien had zero plans to play by the book. Lucien's hand grabbed the deck. His smooth, lethal movements made everyone around him feel like something was off. He fanned the cards like a hardened pro who spent decades in the game. The snap of the cards echoed in the casino's dead silence. Holding the ace, Lucien flashed an arrogant smirk. Scouting for intel while bagging a massive payout was an epic 2-for-1 play. The table was flooded with mountains of chips and a guaranteed winning hand. The crowd started whispering, dying to know who this young shark was. The whole floor locked their shocked eyes on Lucien's table. How many rounds had he swept? Even the old-school sharks were sweating bullets facing him. His opponent, a guy who looked like a seasoned veteran, was drained of all color. He tossed his cards with shaking hands, swallowing a bitter loss under Lucien's crushing pressure. Lucien casually flicked a chip in his hand. He tossed out a savage roast, saying the party just started and folding this early was a buzzkill. He smirked, asking, "Why not stick around for a few more rounds?" Lucien's challenging glare swept the room, sending chills down anyone who locked eyes with him. Hands grabbed his head in a full-blown panic in the back, pale with terror. He couldn't wrap his head around how his boss leveled up into a gambling god. Lucien leaned back, kicking his feet up on the mountain of cash like a king chilling on his throne. He cockily demanded if anyone else in the joint had the guts to step up. His eyes suddenly turned ice-cold like a predator, patiently waiting for the ultimate prey to show its face. Lucien bounced his leg, chilling Max. He knew the big fish he was waiting for was about to take the bait. The casino's main doors slammed open, hallway light flooding in to set up an epic entrance. The guy running this turf finally hit the stage. Lucien cracked a highly satisfied smirk. He's here. His actual endgame for this trip just walked into the room. A jacked guy casually buttoning his shirt strolled in. His aura instantly crushed the basic gamblers from earlier. That was Hugo, aka Black Shark. Sporting a long scar over his right eye and blood-red eyes packed with killer intent, he gave off the vibe of an underworld king. Hugo stopped in front of Lucien, dropping a slick bow that didn't feel submissive at all. He apologized for keeping a VIP like the Valdec young master waiting. He officially introduced himself as the casino manager. Hugo stood tall, hands behind his back, radiating unpredictable danger. Hugo snapped his fingers, signaling his crew to execute a prepped order. Right after, the staff announced the casino was shutting down for the day due to unforeseen issues. Confused eyes locked onto the VIP table. Every guest got booted without hesitation. Hugo kept up his fake polite act while quietly clearing the floor for a private showdown. The massive casino floor turned scary quiet in a flash. Only Lucien, Hugo, and a shaking hands remained in the razor-thin tension. Hugo cracked a calculating smile, claiming tossing the other guests was a small price to guarantee, Young Master Lucien Max comfort here. Lucien didn't flinch. Instead, he hyped up Hugo's instincts. He noted a guy surviving the gambling world had to have eyes that sharp. Hugo bowed again. Lucien casually replied he just dropped by to switch up the vibe, nothing crazy. Hugo scanned Lucien's mountain of winnings. He was genuinely impressed a young VIP could sweep that much cash so fast. He leaned in, dropping a provocative offer. "If you don't mind, could I be your opponent for the next round?" Lucien shrugged, highly amused by the invite. He shot back with a loaded question. "You want to fight me yourself?" Hugo played humble, saying even though he stood no chance against the young master. As the manager, he picked up a few cheap tricks to spice things up. A close-up on Hugo's ambitious, blood-red eyes. Clearly, this black shark was setting up a hardcore trap to flip the board. Hans was crying silent tears, gripping Lucien's shoulder, begging him to bounce. He smelled heavy danger in the room, but Lucien stayed ice-cold. Hans looked pale as a ghost from a terrible gut feeling about the guy standing there. It felt like facing down a beast ready to pounce. Hugo cracked a cryptic smile, his crimson eyes trying to pierce his opponent's soul. A glare oozing the signature danger of a guy born in the dark underworld. Hans lost his chill, screaming a warning at Lucien. Lucien secretly praised Hans's sharp gut. This kid was way more than just a basic servant. Lucien narrowed his golden eyes at the warning. He casually agreed Hans's intuition about this manager was dead on. This was Hugo, the slick but commanding casino manager. But that was just a shell for a name that would soon wreck the underworld. Black Shark Hugo, a destined name that would make the underworld shiver. Lucien knew this was the guy who'd rule the dark if he didn't step in. His grind started in the city's dark alleys, where blood and violence were the only language. Even armed with just raw muscle, he climbed his way up. He stood like a phantom in the night, packing both savage cruelty and cunning brains. No obstacle could block this monster's path. Hugo skyrocketed to the top, stamping his absolute authority in the dark. His influence spread like a wildfire nobody could stop. From gambling and smuggling to taking hit contracts, there was no shady business Hugo didn't touch. He built a disciplined, terrifying crime empire under his boot. He became the king of the night, ruling an underworld stretching across 5 massive territories. When the empire fractured, he used that chaos as a launchpad for his grand ambitions. He crowned himself Baron and evolved into one of the empire's most dreaded warlords. Hugo was truly a bloodthirsty shark waiting to swallow everything whole. Back to reality, Lucien sized up his opponent. Even if Hugo was still a rookie right now, you couldn't deny the deadly aura he gave off. A triumphant smirk painted Lucien's face. He held priceless future intel, enough to flip the script and turn this shark into his personal chess piece. The metaphor of a hooked shark hit hard. "And today I'm here to bag you," Lucien declared in his head, prepping the finishing blow. Cards were dealt swiftly across the wooden table. The ultimate mind game officially began. Hugo takes the bait and drops a bold counteroffer, a no-limit stakes game. He plans to crush the young master's spirit using sheer financial dominance. He erupts into laughter, playing the generous host, claiming he can't let a noble who traveled all this way get bored with pocket change bets. Lucien beams, clapping his hands in excitement like a kid finding a favorite toy. He declares he finally found someone on his wavelength, ignoring a terrified Hans frozen behind him. Hugo sizes him up with a suspicious glare, convinced Lucien is just a shallow noble brat flexing his family's name. He guarantees he'll make the kid pay dearly. He believes those arrogant words mark the beginning of Lucien's downfall. Cards flip onto the table, signaling the climax of this high-stakes showdown. Hugo's eyes narrow with calculation. His dealer getting fleeced by Lucien earlier wasn't part of the plan, but he trusts his ability to dominate the board. Shadows mask Hugo's face as he hones his focus. He remains certain he holds the ultimate advantage in this round. The waiter cowers nearby, awaiting orders. The room's atmosphere turns suffocatingly tense, every heartbeat and breath amplified in the dead silence. Lucien maintains a chill smile while checking his hand. Hugo mentally notes that naive brats like him always double down and spiral after tasting defeat. He vows to devour this arrogant punk, leaving no bones behind, turning him into a brutal lesson on hubris. Hugo's expression twists into a sinister grin in the shadows, relishing the thrill of trapping such a fat prey. Lucian shatters the tension with a bright smile, slapping his forehead as if scolding himself for spacing out. He asks if there's an issue, catching Hugo off guard with the erratic vibe. Lucian requests to ask one question before the real game begins. Hugo smirks and agrees, playing the part of a gracious host ready to humor the poor young master. Clasping his hands in fake sincerity, Lucian admits that despite this being their first meeting, he's already taken a liking to this manager. He scans the thugs guarding Hugo's perimeter. He notes that the aura of subordinates serves as a mirror reflecting their boss's true competence. His gaze shifts to the liquor bottles lining the wooden shelf. He commends the sheer hustle required to run a massive, sophisticated underground casino like this. Hugo delivers a slick reply, asserting he knows his place and never causes trouble for the higher-ups. Lucian smirks, nodding that overstepping boundaries would have gotten him erased ages ago. Waving his hand with a loud laugh, Lucian tells Hugo to drop the stiff, tense act. Despite hailing from the prestigious Valdec family, he isn't some stuck-up, old-school noble. Feigning interest in his cards, Lucian casually drops a lethal verbal strike. He demands Hugo answer honestly about his timeline for mass-producing that stuff. Hugo freezes, shock and suspicion warring on his face. He scrambles to maintain his composure, playing dumb about what horrifying secret this noble implies. Hugo's eyes turn icy, and stunned the moment Lucian name-drops his darkest operation out in the remote Bistre region. The room's atmosphere turns suffocating. Lucian skips the riddles, directly nomming the illegal hallucinogens Hugo secretly manufactures. The two-door guards stiffen up, sweat pouring down their faces from the crushing tension filling the room. Hand stands paralyzed behind his master, drained of all color, jaw dropped in sheer disbelief at what Lucian just leaked. Hugo sits motionless across the table, his face a stony mask, gripping his cards while locking his bloodshot eyes on Lucian. Hearing the term hallucinogens forces cold sweat down Hugo's face as he feigns ignorance, asking what the hell that even means. Lucian casually clicks his chips together, coolly telling the boss to drop the act. He flashes a mocking smirk, straight up exposing Hugo's role as a hired dog for the Marquis Logren family. Lucian's gaze sharpens into blades, declaring he knows their endgame, flooding the Waldeck territory with poison to incite chaos. He lazily waves a hand, mocking the Marquis's cheap orders and warning Hugo about crossing forbidden lines. Hugo glitches for a few seconds, sweat trickling down as this kid threatens him by name. Swallowed by the shadows, his face twitches, baffled by the sheer audacity of a teenager throwing his weight around Waldeck turf. Hugo's shadow stretches across the floor as Lucian outlines the inevitable bloodbath if this operation leaks. The entire casino turns to ice. No one escapes the Grim Reaper's crosshairs once the truth drops. Hugo sits paralyzed, his brain entering overdrive as his top-secret master plan gets dragged into the light. The Joker card rests on the table, a silent testament to the most terrifying opponent Hugo has ever faced. In Jake's past life memories, this scandal wasn't supposed to blow up for another 2 years, right when the Grand Duke received reports on the poison epidemic. A massive purge erupted shortly after, flattening this hideout, but the damage to the territory proved irreversible. That timeline's Hugo managed a clean getaway, leaving nothing but a ruined battlefield in his wake. Staring up at the extravagant chandelier, Lucian realizes his bitter past life experiences serve as the ultimate cheat code right now. Hugo forces a laugh, chalking this up to a massive misunderstanding, while hands continues shaking in his boots behind them. He lowers his voice, playing the victim card, claiming he's just a small-time hustler scraping by, never daring to touch contraband. The future underworld boss swears he'll personally drag out the rat spreading malicious rumors if Lucian gives him a chance to prove it. Lucian smirks at Hugo, dripping with sarcasm, watching him stumble through a pathetic theatrical performance. He flips the script, bringing up an ordinary rice shop acting as a front for some earth-shattering underground activities. Hugo turns pale as Lucian recites the exact layout of his prized secret escape tunnel leading straight out of the castle. Lucian's eyes narrow into a lethal glare, dropping the final question that forces Hugo to face reality. Hugo's eyes bulge, sweat pouring as he realizes his very existence rests in the palm of this kid's hand. He collapses back into his seat, his casino kingpin arrogance dissolving into pure, unadulterated shock. Hugo knows the game is up. Once the enemy uncovers the secret tunnel, all excuses turn to ash. His hands contort on the table, veins bulging under the immense, crushing stress. For a split second, murderous intent flashes in Hugo's red eyes as he debates silencing them permanently. In a dark corner, a thug readies a razor-sharp blade, priming himself to strike. Hiding the weapon behind his back, he feels confident he can assassinate an unguarded young noble in a single thrust. Hans shivers violently in the back, while Lucien calmly advises Hugo to calculate the fallout before making a move. He smiles brightly, yet his words freeze the room, reminding the boss that he's currently betting with his own life. Hugo's hand halts midair, sweat dripping onto the floor as an invisible pressure crushes his spine. He curses his own stupidity, realizing he nearly triggered an apocalypse by plotting to attack Waldeck Blood. Visions of barbaric torture flash through his mind, terrifying him into craving a quick, merciful execution. He squeezes his eyes shut in agony, acknowledging his devastating defeat at the hands of this punk. A loud thud echoes as Hugo drops to his knees, channeling every ounce of his willpower into sheer survival. He slams his forehead against the floor, begging Lucien to show mercy and spare his worthless life. Hugo concedes the young master tracked him down for a specific reason, pledging to obey every command without question. Lucien hides a triumphant smirk behind his hand, realizing the big fish he targeted is finally hooked. Hugo grovels on the floor, drenched in sweat, accepting his role as Lucien's loyal dog just to keep his pathetic life intact. His goons fare no better, hitting the wooden deck and kowtowing endlessly for mercy. Looking down from above, the once notorious casino kingpin looks pathetic groveling before the young master. He taps his fingers against a stack of chips, treating their lives like nothing more than tokens on a betting table. Lucien stands up, casually remarking that keeping a rabid dog around wouldn't be the worst idea. Hugo gazes up, hope igniting as Lucien mentions needing an errand boy. He swears to do anything to repay the favor. Lucien strolls toward the man groveling at his feet. Leaning down to meet Hugo's gaze, he declares that playing the role of a mere hunting dog wastes his true potential. Lucien rests a hand on Hugo's shoulder, intimate yet commanding, softly calling his name to deliver an earth-shattering proposal. He drops a question that paralyzes Hugo. Does he want a shot at becoming a true knight? Hugo's red eyes dilate in pure shock upon hearing a noble title he never dared dream of. That question strikes like lightning, reigniting a burning ambition he once craved to the point of madness. Bitter memories flood his mind, a harsh reality forcing a gutter rat like him to abandon all hopes of climbing the social ladder. Hugo used to be a fierce warrior, swinging his axe through war zones, only to be chained down by bloodline prejudice. No matter how many times he risked his life, shielding his masters or stacked up battlefield merits, he earned nothing but looks of disgust. In the eyes of highborn nobles, a lowlife like him remained a handy tool to be discarded on a whim. He bitterly accepted his lowborn status as the very shackle locking him out of knighthood, regardless of his grind. Resentment boils over as Hugo recalls the endless injustices he swallowed over the years. Fire reignites in his eyes, teeth gritting as fierce desire surges following Lucien's offer. Hugo slams his head against the deck with a loud thud, cementing his iron resolve to snatch this once-in-a-lifetime chance. He vows that if it gets him a taste of that knightly dream, he'll gladly sell his soul to the devil. Voice trembling with raw emotion, Hugo asks one more time if a piece of trash like him actually has permission to become a knight. Lucien's eyes shine with pride, staking the Waldeck family name to guarantee his promise. Resting a hand on his knee, he declares Hugo only needs enough integrity and honor to never bring shame to himself moving forward. Rising under the blinding light, Lucien boldly proclaims that lowborn status will never block the path of anyone who follows his banner. An aura of authority coats the young master's smile as he calls Hugo's name, preparing to capture this man's devotion. Lucien extends a welcoming hand, offering Hugo a chance to ditch his life as a tool and forge a meaningful path as a true human being. A few days later, the Waldeck estate basks in the sunlight, signaling a new order about to take root inside. Nosy maids swarm the area, whispering as the young master drags a strange man into the mansion. Male servants shrink back, intimidated by the grim, murderous aura oozing from the guy tailing Lucien. Standing in the grand hall, Lucian formally introduces the staff to the new talent he just scouted from the streets. The young master kicks his legs onto the desk, hands resting behind his head with pure arrogance, ordering his new assistant to step up. Standing straight, hands clasped behind his back like a pro, Hugo loudly declares his new role as the young master's personal aide. Flashing glowing red eyes and a menacing grin, the new assistant sends shivers down the servants' spines while greeting his seniors. Inside the massive Valdec office, Lucian gathers the entire staff to kick off an internal purge. Hugo towers beside him, while the servants cower, awaiting orders from the noble they used to mock. Lucian props his feet on the desk, ditching all noble etiquette in front of the help. His posture injects a heavy, suffocating pressure into the room. He claps his hands loud enough to kill the whispers, snatching everyone's attention. The polite greetings end. It's time to cut straight to the chase. Sporting a cryptic smirk, Lucian snaps his fingers and orders head maid Jenny brought in immediately. Hearing that name drains the color from the butler's face. He fails to grasp why Lucian would drag the most powerful woman among the staff in here. Lucian sneers, claiming the head maid should be present to welcome the mansion's new management. In the staff's minds, Jenny represents pure arrogance and authority. She isn't just the head maid. She acts as the eyes and ears for the second young master, Geordie, striking fear into everyone. Jenny always looked down on Lucian, treating him like a powerless puppet. Her underlying rebellion forged the exact reason Lucian chose to strike. Lucian gauges the staff's reactions, his gaze sharp enough to pierce their souls. He anticipated their stubbornness and blind loyalty to the rival faction. Servants start muttering, warning each other to stay out of it and avoid collateral damage. They still bank on Lucian backing down if they just stay quiet. To these workers, Lucian remains a rotting rope unfit for support. They'd rather bow to Geordie than take orders from a weakling. Observing their defiance, Lucian vows to carve the truth of who rules this house into their skulls. The butler steps up to the desk, attempting to talk Lucian down. He maintains his condescending tone, blind to the looming danger. He drops a reminder about Geordie's special interest in Jenny, heavily implying a brutal retaliation if Lucian touches her. He scoffs, banking on Geordie's name to shield them all. The servants in the back chime in, begging Lucian to let them live in peace. Murmurs fill the room, breeding a defiant chaos. Hans grinds his teeth at the side, glaring at the staff's blatant disrespect. Hans barks at the crowd to shut up, demanding to know if they forgot their own damn jobs. Face flushed with fury, Hans lays down the law. Lucian owns this place. Hugo glances at Hans raging in the background. Hans continues chewing them out, reminding the mob this territory doesn't belong to Geordie. Flashing a bloodthirsty grin, Hugo tells Hans to leave the trash disposal to him. Hans's sharp words are wasted on these ungrateful fools. He glares at the staff with disgust, knowing a fist works way better than logic when educating traitors. Hugo stands ready to prove his loyalty. Hugo bows, asking Lucian for permission to strike. He guarantees he knows exactly how to silence these mutts and force their submission. Hugo's red eyes flare with menace, treating this loyalty training as a minor chore. Shadows shroud his face, radiating the cruelty of a seasoned killer. He issues a warning that things might get a little rough and waits for his master's nod. Hans watches, feeling an incoming disaster. Crossing his arms, Lucian grins at Hugo's sharp instincts. This right here was the primary reason he recruited the guy. He figures he struck gold catching Hugo in the early stages of his drug empire. Letting him scale up would have made the guy a nightmare to handle later. Lucian pats Hugo's shoulder, officially giving him the green light. He wants Hugo to give these servants an unforgettable performance. Two ambitious monsters lock eyes on the same goal, painting a terrifying picture. Hugo bows, ready to act as Lucian's most brutal blade. The butler flinches, cold sweat drenching his forehead as Hugo stalks toward him. His earlier confidence shatters, replaced by suffocating dread. Hugo towers over the male servant like a mountain, blocking out the room's light. The rest of the staff stare in horror, nobody daring to intervene. Glancing up, the butler reels from Hugo's sheer size up close. He wonders how a human can radiate so much death. Trapped in Hugo's shadow, he feels infinitely small and fragile. The man's aura forces him to tremble, choking every word of defiance in his throat. Swallowing hard to regain composure, he lies to himself, brushing Hugo off as some street thug. He fakes a tough exterior while his eyes scream panic. Elevating his tone, he threatens Hugo to pick the right side or face the consequences. He clings to Geordie's name like a final life preserver. The butler rambles on about Geordie's ruthlessness, insisting the scales tipped in his old master's favor ages ago. He prays his bluff makes Hugo back off. Hugo's face remains frozen, unfazed by empty threats. He tightens his massive fist, prepping a lethal blow to crush the butler's pride. Hugo shoots the guy a look of pity, deeming his last words pathetic. To a former king of the underworld, these threats sound like buzzing flies. The butler freezes, baffled that this guy dares disrespect the Waldeck authority. He opens his mouth to speak, but shock paralyzes his brain. Before he can finish, a steel fist smashes into his face at blinding speed. The sickening crunch of shattering bone echoes through the dead-silent office. The sheer force caves in the butler's face, sending blood and spit flying. Hugo executes the strike without a shred of mercy. The crowd shrieks in terror, witnessing this raw brutality firsthand. They realize the era of disrespecting their master just ended in blood. The butler's body launches into the air, flying several meters before slamming into the heavy doors. Hugo's punch officially kickstarts the bloody purge at the Waldeck estate. While Hans experiences maximum shell shock, Lucien chills like nothing happened, looking downright smug. The young master shamelessly basks in the chaos he orchestrated. Hugo stands over the floored butler, exuding a pressure that makes onlookers shiver. He doesn't even glance at the victim, treating it like a minor chore. Sprawled on the ground, the butler's eyes roll back, unable to process getting one shot. The mental damage stings worse than his broken face. Blood pools from the pathetic butler's mouth, proving Hugo's monstrous strength. Weak groans break the room's deadly silence. The surrounding staff scream in horror at the carnage. They question Lucien's authority and the ruthless streak he just unleashed. Ignoring their weak protests, Hugo stands unfazed, deeming this punishment too light. He gears up for the next phase of the purge. Hugo's face twists into a nightmare grin, proclaiming himself an expert at educating disrespectful fools. His red eyes hunt for the next target to discipline. On the desk, Lucien's tea continues steaming, creating a bizarre contrast with the bloodbath. The master's relaxed vibe becomes the staff's worst nightmare. The butler struggles to rise, his eyes hollow and face mangled. He senses Lucien's dominating aura bearing down on him. Heavy footsteps and dragging noises echo from the hallway, signaling the arrival of the main event. The grand doors swing open, revealing figures stepping out of the shadows. Two muscular thugs drag a thrashing Jenny into the room as she screams in fury. Despite losing, the head maid fights back, demanding they let go. Jenny's freckled face flushes crimson with rage. She barks threats at her captors. She clings to the belief that Geordie's protection will save her. A thug coldly orders her to shut up and walk, clearly exhausted by her ego. Right now, Lucien's command is the only law they follow. They shove Jenny across the threshold, her fiery red hair a tangled mess from the scuffle. She can't fathom how these one-scouring grunts dare manhandle her. Vengeance burns in her eyes. She vows to make everyone in the room pay dearly. Pure hatred contorts every muscle in her face. Inside the office, they drag Jenny right to Lucien's feet, splitting the ranks of terrified servants. A public humiliation she never saw coming. Shaking, the two grunts report their successful capture. Their voices crack, terrified of becoming the next targets of Lucien's wrath. They formally verify the head maid's identity, eager to prove their newfound loyalty to their ruthless boss. Lucien stares out the window, turning his back on the room as if Jenny's presence means nothing. His arrogant posture ramps up the pressure. He chuckles softly, brewing a massive scheme behind that calm exterior. Slowly turning around with a plastic smile, he greets Jenny like an old friend. His chill demeanor clashes hard with her feral glaring. Lucien gestures politely, inviting her to speak. He savors every second of this cat-and-mouse game he set up. Jenny grinds her teeth, fighting the urge to explode. Lucien mocks her, nodding his boys might have been a bit overzealous with her welcome. The head maid snaps, demanding an explanation for this madness. She flexes her fatting authority, refusing to let this kid bully her. She declares she isn't scared, promising Geordie will tear the place down over this. She uses her old boss's shadow, hopping to force Lucien to back off. Lucien flashes a loaded smile, softly asking who said this ends peacefully. His gaze darkens, radiating lethal intent. His hand grazes the leather whip resting on the desk, a blatant signal of the incoming pain. The talking stops, the disciplinary hearing begins. Gripping the whip, he coldly announces the fun is just starting. The leather strands twitch like venomous snakes waiting to strike. A chill runs down Jenny's spine as she meets Lucian's dead eyes. Her confidence shatters against the iron will of the once weak young master. Staring down with icy golden eyes, Lucian tells her to run her mouth all she wants, because today she dies in this room as his ultimate warning. In the minds of the crowd, a guillotine drops, the universal symbol of brutal punishment. Historically, nothing resets the pecking order like a good old execution. The image of a screaming convict under a cold blade perfectly captures this ruthless justice. With a clear target, this execution broadcasts an undeniable message to the estate. This punishment will brand their brains, forcing loyalty without needing to replace the entire roster. The crowd stands dead silent, watching the old regime burn. Lucian saunters toward Jenny, the whip flicking to the rhythm of his steps. Each footfall ticks down the corrupt maid's remaining lifespan. He squares up against her, exuding an overwhelming aura. A true master facing down a servant who forgot her place. Cold sweat breaks out on Jenny's forehead as she realizes Lucian isn't bluffing. Genuine terror hijacks her brain, deleting any thought of resistance. Disgust drips from Lucian's eyes as he peers at the shaking rat. He's ready to erase his pathetic past reputation for good. Gripping the handle, he vows that after today, even the Grand Duke will view him differently. A message of raw power and cruelty will echo across the kingdom. Lucian snaps his fingers, ordering his men to hold her down. A heavy hand grabs Jenny's shoulder, smashing her face toward the floor. Her shrieks of pain and terror bounce off the walls. Her knees buckle, slamming into the tiles as she gets pinned. Resistance proves pointless against Lucian's overwhelming force. Lucian gazes at the wretch at his feet, whip primed to deliver the verdict. This is the exact moment he claims dominance over the Waldeck household. Jenny forces a mocking grin, delusional enough to think she's untouchable. She spits a sarcastic warning at Lucian, acting like she still runs the show. Defiance flashes in her eyes as she uses Geordie's name as a meat shield. She believes a single scratch on her will unleash Geordie's worst wrath on Lucian. Lucian's shadow looms over her as he listens to her empty threats. His silence breeds no fear, only pure disgust for her bloated ego. Inspecting the whip, he sweeps a cold gaze across her face. He asks if those are her final words before facing the music. He notes the tragic irony of her screaming her brother's name right up to her dying breath. Pinned by the thugs, Jenny pales at his terrifying lack of empathy. Lucian dares her to play any remaining cards if she wants to live. Sunlight bleeds through the massive windows, contrasting the grim reality inside. Jenny's screams shatter the mansion's fake peace. Leaning in close, Lucian locks eyes with her, stating he possesses enough dirt to bury her 10 times over. He rattles off her crimes, from insulting nobility to embezzling funds. Jenny's face darkens as Lucian crushes her delusions of Geordie saving her. He coldly questions how Geordie could possibly interfere when he holds the executioner's axe. Lucian dips his head, shadows masking his eyes in mystery and danger. He points out Geordie couldn't do a damn thing if their father greenlit this hit. A wicked smirk spreads across his face as he imagines the bounty his old man might drop for this. Taking out a rogue servant counts as a solid win. Cold sweat washes over Jenny's pale face as the Grim Reaper taps her shoulder. Her ego evaporates, replaced by raw, primal fear shining in her eyes. Lucian cracks the whip, the sound slicing through the dead air. He reminds her Geordie is just another candidate in the rat race, nothing more. Towering over her, Lucian blocks her light and her final shreds of hope. He drops the cold, hard truth. He is the apex predator in this room. Dim light catches his emotionless face as he declares he genuinely gave her a shot. She chose war, and now she pays the toll. He pins the blame entirely on her for digging her own grave. Jenny's hands shake violently as she kneels in submission. The mighty headmaid's pride crumbles to dust before the new king. She wails in despair, begging Lucian for mercy and forgiveness. Tear-streaked and sweaty, she looks like absolute trash. Lucian stares down at her with a bored smile, unfazed by her pathetic crying. He savors every drop of his praised despair. Bathed in crimson light, Lucian raises the whip, prepping the final strike. He tells her to chalk this up to awful luck. The whip tears through the air, carving bloody trails fueled by rage. Every strike nails the coffin shut on Jenny's reign of terror. The Waldeck castle gleams under the sun, hiding the savage bloodbath going down inside. Sprinting down the hall, a panicked Geordie Waldeck charges toward the office. His heavy boots slam against the tiles, broadcasting his late arrival. Rage warps Geordie's face, his brain rejecting the intel he just got. He can't fathom Lucian laying a finger on Jenny, a woman he treats like family. Grinding his teeth, he pictures the cowardly Lucian from a few days ago. This extreme character swap breeds anxiety and explosive anger inside him. Standing before the heavy doors, his shadow stretches into the dark room like he's facing an alien boss. Geordie senses a massive anomaly lurking inside. In the dark, Geordie reviews his spy network planted around Lucian's crib. He assumed he had his useless little brother on a tight leash. Visualizing Lucian getting bullied by the staff, Geordie trusted them to shut down any rebellion. His massive ego blinded him to Lucian's glow-up. He pauses at the door, an invisible force walling him out. The bitter reality hits him. He lost control of the board. Geordie shoots a stunned glare at the guarding servants, realizing Lucian actually flipped their loyalty. This betrayal strikes a massive blow to his ego. The servants beg Geordie to chill, swearing the intel on Lucian has to be a glitch. Confusion paints the faces of the crew that used to mock the third young master. They insist a coward like Lucian lacks the guts to hurt anyone, especially with his phobia of Geordie. Their words only fuel the second brother's paranoia. Geordie's eyes turn lethal as a blood-curdling scream rips through the door. A sick gut feeling confirms a disaster just dropped. The doors rattle under the sheer violence popping off inside. Geordie and the crew watch helplessly as Jenny's cries flatline. Leather strands drip with fresh crimson, splashing onto the cold tiles. This paints a crystal-clear picture of Lucian's zero-tolerance policy for rats. From an outsider's POV, Lucian standing over Jenny's wrecked body looks like a horror movie. Blood spilled, and the Waldeck hierarchy officially rebooted under the young master's iron fist. Lucian watches Hugo pin Jenny to the floor. Her back is painted red, fresh whip marks bleeding into the luxury rug. Second young master Geordie bursts in, his face purple with rage. He screams, demanding to know what the hell Lucian is doing. Lucian turns casually, flashing a sarcastic, polite smile. He greets his older brother like they just bumped into each other at a party. His eyes harden instantly, telling Geordie to take a hike because he's busy. He vows to rip out these rotting weeds today no matter what. He orders Hugo to drag her up. Hugo complies immediately, moving without a flinch in front of the crowd. Seeing his pawn tortured, Geordie loses his mind and barks at his boys, Oliver and Gert, to snatch her back. His goons rush in. The office devolves into a war zone as rival guards clash. Heavy boots shake the wooden floorboards. Surrounded, Lucian smirks like a menace. He calls Hugo's name, ready to play his trump card. An ironclad warning drops. Anyone stepping past the 3-pace mark pays with their life. Lucian coldly orders Hugo to slit the maid's throat on the spot. Hugo presses the blade to Jenny's neck, her eyes bulging in pure terror. Drowning in bloodlust, Lucian claims full responsibility for the kill. Right now, he looks like the devil himself. Oliver and Gert freeze, terrified to move an inch. Geordie stands in the back, staring wide-eyed at his psycho brother. Hugo locks eyes with his prey, guaranteeing she won't leave this room in one piece. He tells Lucian to relax and let him handle the trash. The razor-sharp edge bites into her skin, making Jenny convulse. She mentally breaks, tears streaming as the Reaper knocks. Drowning in despair, she screams for Geordie to save her. Her face twists into an ugly mess of tears and sweat. Geordie throws his hand up, roaring at Hugo to drop the knife. He promises a brutal execution if the guy disobeys. Blinded by rage, Geordie threatens to mount Hugo's head and string up his entire family on the castle walls. Unfazed, Hugo smirks and rejects the trash offer. Geordie glitches out, unable to process a servant flexing on him this hard. Hugo holds his ground, fist wrapped tight in Jenny's hair. He declares his loyalty belongs solely to Lucian. To a beast like him, orders from anyone else mean jack shit. Glaring down the enemy guards, Hugo vows to execute his master's will, no matter the fallout. His crimson eyes send chills down everyone's spine. Geordie shakes with fury, knuckles popping from gripping his fists so hard. He's trapped in a massive checkmate. Forcing his heart rate down, Geordi questions the brutal treatment of a simple maid. He scrambles for a loophole to flip the script. Lucian casually swings the leather whip, disgust written all over his face. He lists the charges: insubordination, disrespect, and stealing family funds. A throne emerges in the shadows, symbolizing the Valdec crown. The war for that seat remains a bloody grind. First, the silhouette of the eldest brother Tristan drops in, a monster both Lucian and Geordi have to respect. Next is Geordi, dripping in high-class noble drip. These guys form the ultimate boss rush Lucian must conquer. For Geordi, this is survival mode to hoard power before Judgment Day. He cannot afford a single misstep. But lately, Lucian keeps embarrassing him in public. He even had to sacrifice his elite knight Hendrik to save face. Geordi's face darkens under the lights. If he fails to protect a loyal pawn like Jenny, his street cred hits rock bottom. He envisions his own crew stabbing him in the back. If this leaks, the loyalty of his squad crumbles. He clenches his fists, swallowing venom. Lucian trapped him in a dead-end maze. Finally, Geordi bites the bullet and takes the L he demands Lucian let Jenny go. Oliver and Gert back off, looking pissed that their boss folded to a kid. Watching from the sidelines, Hans drops his jaw. He never expected his young master to wreck the second brother. Hugo keeps the blade to Jenny's throat, waiting for the signal. The maid practically passes out from shock. Lucian turns his back and walks away, his shadow dragging across the tiles. Blood splattered on his cheek makes his grin look demonic. He asks if Geordi plans to sweep this under the rug with a basic apology. A crumpled paper acts as the smoking gun for her embezzlement. Lucian sarcastically asks how Geordi intends to fix the lives she ruined. Eyes sharp as razors, Lucian wonders if noble tongues are plated in gold, expecting everyone to bow to their every word. Shrugging innocently, he mocks Geordi's talk about winning and losing. Geordi stands frozen, face contorted in rage. Lucian lands the critical hit. He's just doing his job, and embezzlement carries the death penalty. Facing away, Lucian stares down at the groveling maid. He argues that covering this up makes the Valdec family look like a joke to the public. Geordi watches from behind, stressed out of his mind. Lucian plays the good brother, claiming he'd love to drop it since Geordi begged, but rules are rules. A calculated, lethal smile creeps onto Lucian's face. His eyes scream danger as he secures the bag. He glances back, eyes blazing with defiance. He flat-out states he has zero reason to follow Geordi's orders. Geordi squeezes his fists, shaking with rage at his brother's disrespect. He can't process Lucian openly defying him like this. Grinding his teeth, he tells Lucian to cut the crap and name his price. The second young master's patience hits zero. Lucian snaps the whip against the floor, the crack echoing loud. He drops ancient wisdom, steal from others, pay the blood toll. Jenny shivers, sweat pouring as she hears her fate. Her eyes widen in horror, realizing she's dealing with a monster. Geordi scowls, humiliated as Lucian demands a payout multiplying the stolen cash. Sweat drips down his face, pinned in a massive corner. Lucian flashes a $1 million smile. He gestures with his hand, mocking his brother on the exact price to buy back his trash maid. Scene shift, the Valdec estate stands imposing and glorious under the bright sun. A massive architectural flex hiding the family's brutal politics. Inside the massive office, Grand Duke Sigmund Valdec broods by the tall window. His broad back projects an unstoppable aura. Sigmund rocks a stern face with a finely trimmed blonde beard. His eyes look deep and cold, clearly cooking up a master plan. The butler stands behind him, reporting that the recent chaos got handled smoothly. Sigmund listens to the debrief like a hawk. Sigmund reviews a document, scanning the text. His youngest son's wild moves finally grab his attention. He glances up, questioning the butler on the intel's accuracy. A hint of doubt leaks from the boss's tone. The butler bows deeply, swearing he verified the facts himself. He delivers the report with dead serious professionalism. He adds that Geordi coughed up 10 times the embezzled amount to Lucian as penalty fees. Sigmund stays quiet, face like stone despite the insane news. The butler drops more intel. Lucian recruited a street thug named Hugo to quickly execute the spies infesting his sector. Gripping the paper, Sigmund analyzes Lucian's endgame. His trash, son-making boss moves forces him to recalculate everything. The butler states Lucian's zone boasts the tightest security on the property. Sigmund stares out the window, deep in thought. Sigmund remains silent, brooding in the shadows. A knock shatters the dead air. The heavy office doors creak open. Sigmund coldly commands the guest to enter. Lucian strolls in, chill as ice, placing a hand over his heart for a flawless, noble salute. He announces he answered his father's summons. Sigmund turns, his gaze scanning Lucian to gauge his true power level. A heavy tension chokes the room. Squaring up against his dad, Lucian looks small but radiates an unshakable aura. He clasps his hands behind his back, waiting for the boss to speak. Sigmund studies him, realizing the kid's eyes look built different now. The old cowardice vanished, replaced by razor-sharp confidence. Sigmund notes Lucian stirred up massive drama in the family recently. Lucian looks up, golden eyes glowing against his dad's critique. Lucian shrugs it off as no big deal. He explains he simply disciplined servants who forgot who writes their checks. Sigmund taps his chair, pointing out the kid humiliated his own older brother in the process. The room's pressure spikes hard. He warns that Geordie holds epic grudges. He asks if Lucian packs enough heat to survive the incoming payback. Sigmund towers over his son. Lucian stays frosty, claiming the issue is fully resolved. Lucian declares he merely enforced the natural pecking order. He states he can't flex the Valdec name if he ducks his duties out of fear of revenge. A cocky grin lights up his face. He insists he made the only choice that wouldn't drag the family name through the mud. Sigmund stares, trying to decode this massive upgrade. Sigmund closes his eyes, exhaling to reset the vibe. The chat hits a critical turning point. A tapestry flexing the Valdec crest hangs in the room, a pure symbol of legacy and raw power. Sigmund states Lucian holds the right to fight back if Geordie keeps pushing. He quietly sanctions a turf war between his own kids. But he drops a warning. If the beef damages the family's bottom line, the rules change. Lucian listens, face locked in a poker expression. Sigmund lays down the law. Right or wrong, he backs Geordie. Lucian drops his jaw, stunned by the blatant favoritism. He fails to grasp the logic behind his old man's ruling. He stands there, hunting for a reason behind the unfairness. Sigmund smirks, asking why the kid looks so shocked. His eyes stay cold and cruel, reflecting the iron laws of a mob boss. He breaks it down. Geordie acts rash, but his grind brought massive value to the family for years. Contrast that with Lucian blowing a whole year doing nothing. The gap between Geordie's resume and Lucian's trash track record justifies the Grand Duke's bias. A banner with the golden lion drops down. Sigmund states prioritizing the top earner is just basic math for a boss. Lucian touches his chin, processing his dad's verbal barrage. He stays quiet, connecting the dots behind the speech. Standing tall, Lucian fires back. He points out this sounds like a direct order to step on his brother's neck to climb the ladder. Sigmund glares, issuing a heavy challenge. He tells Lucian to level up and prove his worth if he wants a seat at the table. The boss guarantees Lucian will find his answers once he reaches that tier. Lucian squints, calculating the angles. He realizes his dad is manufacturing a crisis to force him to grind harder. Sigmund stands with his hands behind his back, exuding king energy. Lucian gets the hint. The succession battle kicks off soon. Closing his eyes, Lucian cracks a smile. He knows his dad wants him to seize this window before it slams shut. Sigmund's eyes flash, reading his kid's mind. Lucian wonders if all fathers operate on this insane, cutthroat logic. Reaching into his jacket, Lucian pulls out a prepped white envelope. He steps up and slams the document onto the boss's desk. Sigmund raises an eyebrow, shocked by the kid's aggressive play. Lucian asks his dad how he'd react if he already mapped out a master move for this game. Flashing a dangerous grin, he promises it's a massive power play. The paper serves as a declaration of war, ready to wreck the Duke's chessboard. Sigmund sits in his luxury office, scanning Lucian's intel drop. Lucian stands still, waiting for the explosion. Sigmund's rough hands flip the pages, the silence choking the room. Gripping the paper, his veins pop as the scandalous details hit his brain. He glares at his son, demanding to know if this intel is legit. Unfazed, Lucian swears on his life it's facts. Sigmund warns him to cut the act if he's just hyping things up for clout. Grinding his teeth, fury erupts as Sigmund realizes the Logren family dared push drugs on his turf. A blast of deep blue mana explodes from Sigmund, blowing Lucian's coat back. The Grand Duke's pressure crushes the room, forcing Lucian into silence. He stands like a mountain amidst a storm of raging mana. Bloodshot eyes glare, refusing to believe someone tainted Valdek's holy ground. Lucian feels the gravity crushing his bones, realizing this is the true aura of the Empire's guardian. Sweat pours down his face. He knows he'll pass out before the fight starts if this keeps up. Fighting the pressure, Lucian asks permission to drop one more line. He argues that snitching to the king just lets the Logrens sacrifice a few pawns to escape clean. Sigmund listens, his sharp eyes tracking every micro-expression on the kid's face. He marvels at Lucian's lethal political instincts, a skill the trash son never showed before. Lucian suggests that instead of just cutting their cash flow, they deliver a crippling blow, basically hacking off an enemy arm. On a phantom chessboard, pieces fall before a king, broadcasting Lucian's ambition to flip the script. Shattered pieces litter the floor, proving the absolute ruin Lucian plans for the ops. Sitting down, Sigmund weighs the odds of his failed son's strategy. He demands a full breakdown of Lucian's master plan. Lucian replies he already rigged the board to trap the enemy. Flashback to Hugo and his goons kissing the floor, showing how Lucian bagged the underworld boss. Sigmund recalls the intel about Lucian recruiting a heavy-hitting mobster named Hugo. Sitting in the grand office, he wonders how early Lucian started cooking this plot. Tapping the desk, he asks if Lucian plans to weaponize a traitor to ambush the rival family. Lucian nods, explaining the Logrens will never expect their top dog to bite back. He guarantees this setup forces the Logren VIPs to step out of the shadows to clean up the mess. Sunlight hits the castle windows, highlighting the contrasting vibes between father and son. Smirking, Sigmund points out a massive glitch in the kid's matrix. He notes Lucian is betting his whole stack on a single wild card, a backstabbing street rat. Sigmund preaches that human nature stays rigged, and trusting a snake will get him killed. A cocky smile flashes on Lucian's face. He predicted his dad's trust issues. He declares he isn't betting on trust. He's banking on the raw greed driving that man. Lucian reveals Hugo's desperate hunger to become a true knight and carve his name into Empire history. A vision of Hugo kneeling returns, highlighting the burning ambition he pledged to his new boss. The mob boss clutches his chest, ready to bleed to cement his legacy as a legend. Sigmund calls it a delusional pipe dream for a thug punching above his weight class. Eyes blazing with grit, Lucian claims he believes in that dream, just like he believed in himself in his past life. Sigmund sizes up his son, thinking this logic sounds way too soft for a noble. He drops the ultimate question, what if he chokes? Lucian coldly replies he'll take the bullet for that failure. Lucian's eyes glow with chilling resolve, swearing to put his own life on the line for this bet. Sigmund squints at the outcast son, who just delivered an insane political win. Silence rules the room as the Grand Duke recalculates Lucian's rank in the family hierarchy. Sigmund orders Lucian to hit the training grounds the second he heals up to start a fresh boot camp. He officially crowns Lucian a successor candidate and promises to personally teach him the Lionheart sword techniques. Daylight blankets the majestic castle, stamping a massive milestone in the third son's life. Sunbeams pierce the windows, painting a quiet, peaceful vibe across the Kelheim estate hallways. Inside the study, Sigmund grinds through ancient texts while the head butler stands by for orders. The butler bows, deeply ashamed he missed the massive corruption happening right under their noses. Sigmund slams the book shut and locks eyes with his right-hand man. He tells the loyal butler to drop the guilt trip, admitting he forced the guy to focus strictly on border issues. Sigmund credits Lucian's discovery to pure luck, guessing the Logrens blew massive resources to keep the operation stealthy. They brainstorm the Logrens' endgame for cooking drugs. Sigmund figures they plan to use it as leverage against the king. Sigmund wonders how a marquis, who knows the Empire's political chessboard flawlessly, could get blinded by his own safety. He pivots to Hugo, the shadow dweller who just swore his life to his son. The butler recites Hugo's street cred, a ruthless underworld kingpin who refuses to play second fiddle. The butler glazes Lucian for tamming a beast like Hugo, openly shocked by the kid's massive level up. Sigmund echoes the word level up with a dark tone, his eyes masking complex thoughts. He broods over his son's sudden, insane stat boosts. A vision of a spider web in the dark drops, symbolizing the brutal intel network Hugo commands. If Hugo was a gullible fool chasing fairy tailies, the streets would have swallowed him ages ago. Sigmund realizes a veteran predator like Hugo must have spotted god-tier potential inside Lucian. Hugo stands in the dark, gazing at the stars, feeling like he found a king worth dying for. Flickering lights in the study hit the ancient bookshelves, guarding the Valdek family's darkest secrets. Sigmund decides to fast-track Lucian's promotion, acknowledging the kid proved his worth. The butler smiles, relieved when Sigmund announces Lucian's secret arts training kicks off tomorrow. Sigmund reveals he's tagging in Sir Eisen to act as his son's personal mentor. The butler's jaw drops hearing a literal legend is stepping out of retirement. Far away on a frozen lake, a massive blue beam shoots into the sky, signaling a dormant master's return. Sword aura explodes through the ancient forest, shredding the canopy around the hideout. In the center of the blast, Eisen Breitner meditates, an ancient blade resting before him, craving a master. A full moon lights up the Valdek estate, as rumors of the massive shake-up spread like wildfire. A shocked scream shatters the midnight silence in the dorms. Hans freezes, tears in his eyes, staring at Lucian like he just heard a fairy tale. The kid tackles Lucian with a hug, screaming to know if the successor candidate rumors are legit. Flustered by the hype, Lucian asks Hugo to peel this crying mess off him. A massive meat-hook hand grabs Hans, instantly killing his momentum. Dead serious, Hugo orders Hans to chill out and act right in front of the boss. He smoothly notes that considering the master's stats, getting drafted was a guaranteed lock. Hugo adds that a right-hand man, like Hans, shouldn't lose his cool over basic wins. Hans short-circuits, face burning red as the butcher acknowledges him as Lucian's right hand. Stars pop in Hans's eyes, his chest swelling with maximum pride. A massive smile stretches across the loyal kid's face, nuking all his past anxiety. Hans strikes a goofy pose, still processing his new title. Hugo drops a rare, soft smile, patting the kid's back to make it official. Hugo lifts Hans like a toy, making the kid yell in panicked confusion. Lucian watches from afar, sensing the brotherhood forming in his squad. Lucian smirks, praising Hugo's elite HR skills forged in the underworld trenches. He backs Hugo's claim, admitting he kept this intel VIP, only for a strategic reason. Lucian's eyes turn dark as he watches Hans floating in Hugo's grip. He knows Hans runs a cowardly software on weak hardware, a fatal flaw if left unpatched. But he also sees Hans's unbreakable loyalty, a guy who will never bail when the server goes down. He bets that with the right grind, Hans will evolve into an elite manager and the ultimate defensive anchor for their operations. Lucian shifts his gaze to Hugo, a walking tank capable of terrifying any opponent. His endgame is to max out Hugo's combat stats, turning the butcher into a frontline vanguard knight. A vision of a silver-armored badass flashes in Lucian's mind, representing the deadliest weapon in his future arsenal. Instead of spamming weak units, Lucian prioritizes elite builds, crafting a core squad of monsters. Lucian breaks the news. The grind to the throne will be insane and packed with death traps. Hugo and Hans instantly drop the jokes, realizing the boss needs them for the long haul. Standing in a glowing aura, Lucian declares his master plan only clears if they ride together. Hugo slams a fist to his chest, eyes burning with fanatic loyalty, vowing to never let his master down. Hans fires back with a massive smile, radiating pure hype to be part of the squad. The sun breaches the distant peaks, burning off the fog and highlighting the Valdek fortress. Torches still burn in the massive training hall, cutting through the morning chill. Lucian clocks in early, looking sharp and lethal in a dark red training fit. Closing his eyes, he reviews the brutal grind and endless defeats from his past life. Back then, he operated as a solo merc, hustling across the map just to survive. He remembers freezing by campfires, starving for a taste of elite sword arts. The words sword forms flash in his brain, the ultimate cheat code he spent a lifetime chasing. He recalls his desperate thirst for high-tier skills, locked away behind noble paywalls. But after swallowing infinite disrespect and pain, All he scored was a trash map and fake rumors. The dusty manual he looted contained 0 god-tier moves, just a buggy, nerfed moveset. It wasn't even a real knight's path, just scraps tossed to rookie grunts. Trapped in a library of ancient texts, Lucian studied endlessly, but the bloodline barrier blocked him out. For a gutter merc, catching a glimpse of a real technique felt like winning the lottery. He suffered constant humiliation from weaker foes, carrying pay-to-win sword arts. The trauma of watching his squad wipe, because he lacked the DPS, scarred his soul forever. Clenching his fist, Lucian feels the massive gap between his cursed past and this broken new game plus. An insane drop landed in his lap. VIP access to inherited skills meant only for the ruling class. The prize is the Lionheart Sword, an ancient art with a ridiculously high damage cap. He wonders how broken this legendary style will get when he optimizes it himself. A jolt of electricity spikes his spine. Pure hype and adrenaline paint his face before the tutorial begins. He takes a massive breath to chill out, trying to stop his heart from beating out of his chest. Scanning the empty hall, he realizes his hype made him log in way too early. He drops to the floor and runs his mana circuits to clear his head, prepping for the most vital quest of his life. Sitting cross-legged, he flashbacks to stealing trash-tier sword moves in the shadows. A smug grin hits his face as he recognizes the insane value of this perfect respawn. Lucian sits dead still in the arena, his shadow stretching across the stone under the morning sun. Dead silence rules the room, broken only by his breathing. Seen through the pillars, his small frame looks tiny against the massive architecture, yet he radiates heavy boss energy. He holds his stance, deaf to the world. White birds carve the blue sky, their flapping wings shattering the morning peace. Nature itself pauses for the incoming power surge. A massive shadow falls over the tiles, flagging the arrival of an absolute unit stepping into the arena. Still locked in meditation, Lucian cycles his mana, clueless that a predator is tracking his every breath. From above, Eisen Breitner scans the kid with eagle eyes. He notes the kid holds perfect form without a single glitch or drop in stamina. Eisen's memory files show the old Lucian as a fragile coward hiding behind others. This hard reset begs serious questions. Looking at the current version, he spots 0 trace of that old weakling. This kid carries the cold vibe of someone holding the script. Flashback to last night. Grand Duke Sigmund flexes in the VIP room, offering Eisen the gig to coach his son. Sigmund puts his silver cup down, eyes heavy with regret over abandoning Lucian for being a trash-tier unit. He admits he wrote the kid off as a lost cause, but his recent MVP plays forced a massive recalculation. Eisen chills in silence, sipping wine, analyzing the Grand Duke's rare confession. He calculates the risk-reward of the offer. Eisen raises an eyebrow at the word talent, a stat he judges brutally after a lifetime in the trenches. Sigmund locks it in. If he's hyping the kid, the talent pool is deep enough to justify the grind. The craziest part isn't his physical specs, it's his iron mental stat post-crisis. The kid leveled up overnight. Sigmund smirks, betting his veteran friend will catch the vision the second he sees the kid move. Back to now, Eisen leans on the balcony, watching Lucian freeze like a statue. Respect replaces his initial doubts. The legendary sword, Saint cracks a satisfied smile. He just found a god-tier drop ready to be forged into Valdek's ultimate weapon. Sword Saint, a max-level title reserved for freaks who break the limits of circulation and touch the ceiling of sword arts. Rare as unicorns in Empire lore, the sword community worships them like living gods. Standing in the Grand Hall, Lucian trips out facing a boss of this magnitude. Jaw dropped, he gets staggered by the insane pressure this man leaks just by existing. It's Eisen Breitner himself, the legendary sword Saint rocking silver hair and a holy aura. He offers a slight bow, dropping a casual reminder that they last crossed paths at the Duke's birthday bash years ago. Eisen formally drops his name and claims the instructor role starting today. Lucian connects the dots from Hans's morning leaks, but never expected his new coach to be a literal myth. He stares blankly at the towering legend commanding the hall. 0 ego attached, Lucian bows low to show massive respect for the chance to leech XP from him. Eisen waves it off with a laugh, calling himself an old fossil hiding behind an overpowered title. But the old man wonders why a high-tier successor candidate bows so fast. Lucian shoots straight. Status matters, but giving respect where it's due is non-negotiable. Stripping away the noble tags, Aizen remains a top-tier veteran worthy of worship. Seeing the kid's dead serious grind set makes the sword saint sweat a little. He gives Lucian the green light. The kid's face lights up, eyes glowing with hype. Aizen cues the tutorial, and Lucian nods, running on infinite adrenaline. He guides the kid to the yard and orders him to run laps around the map. The second the words drop, Lucian hits the dirt in a flawless sprinter's stance. Brain locked in, muscles coiled to blast off on command. He asks if he should pop sprint immediately, catching Aizen off guard with the raw hustle. He throws a hand up, asking if the kid needs to read the patch notes first. Aizen wonders why he isn't asking the point of the drill or the distance to manage his stamina bar. Lucian smirks, trusting the coach's meta. If the master calls a play, he runs it without questions. In his book, a student's only job is executing the master's code flawlessly. Aizen squints, spotting a pure, unfiltered hunger burning in the kid's core. He smiles, finally grasping why the Duke banked his chips on this kid. On the mark, Lucian launches like a bullet. He blitzes across the dirt, leaving the fancy hall in the dust with insane focus. From the high ground, Aizen monitors the tiny speck grinding laps on the massive track. Lucian runs without pausing, eyes locked forward with freakish determination. His boots hit the dirt with a perfect rhythm, proving his stamina bar is massive. Actually, Lucian hacked the true meaning of this basic test from minute 1. It's not a cardio check, it's a hidden vibe check to measure a rookie's true ceiling. The drill gives him brutal flashbacks to his merc captain days in his past life. He used to assign trash deer fetch quests to noobs to test their mettle. He'd watch them like a hawk, their reactions exposed who actually wanted to level up. Through their whining, he read their source code and filtered out the weak links. Back to reality, Lucian keeps grinding, feeling light as a feather despite the mileage. He shoots a look at the stairs, where the sword saint maintains a hard lock on him. Aizen stands frozen, analyzing his new student's bizarrely chill running form. Flashing a cocky grin, Lucian feels he just handed in the perfect answer sheet. Lucian vows to run until his HP hits 0, his eyes radiating a terrifying resolve. An hour passes, his blonde hair takes wind damage but his face stays icy. He stares at his hands, sensing a glitch. He's been speedrunning for an hour with 0 stamina drain. Every footstep lands like a bomb. The longer he runs, the more his power spikes. He glides across the field like a ghost, leaving speed mirages in his wake. He questions how a nerfed body, previously surviving on honey water and walks, pulls off this god-tier feat. In the distance, the sword saint remains a statue on the steps, eyes glued to the grinding anomaly. Aizen Breitner takes massive mental damage. He planned a basic stat check, but this breaks the game engine. The veteran's face hardens, sweat dropping because this kid defies all known physics. Lucian runs bone dry without sweating, breathing as calm as a frozen lake. Even a max-level knight struggles to maintain this flawless equilibrium. Remembering the kid's zen face during meditation, an insane theory hits Aizen. The massive yard sits empty, featuring only howling wind and a kid breaking world records. Aizen walks down, closing in on the Duke's third son. He commands Lucian to cut the engine, wrapping up the hour-long endurance raid. The kid stops on a dime, looking bored, and even asks what the holdup is. Blue mana cloaks Aizen as he registers the kid wasn't just running, he was cycling mana the whole time. Wearing a grim face, he demands to ask Lucian a direct question. Aizen needs to know if the kid's morning routine was an advanced circulation, instead of basic AFK meditation. Lucian tilts his head, keeping a poker face against the Grandmaster's interrogation. He confirms he ran circulation because it's the best hack to clear his RAM. Cold sweat hits Aizen. His crazy theory was 100% accurate. Unable to fight the hype, he asks permission to run a direct diagnostic on the kid's hardware. Aizen grabs Lucian's wrist, ordering him to stay dead still no matter how weird it feels. Neon blue mana starts transferring between their hands. He hacks the energy stream deep into the kid's mana circuits. The sword saint's green eyes narrow, dumping all his stats into sensory perception. A blinding flash erupts, X-raying Lucian's core while the master watches in awe. Pure mana threads twist together, Aizen realizes Lucian hit the end of circulation, the exact endgame tier he occupies. But a darker truth drops. For this kid, it's not the endgame, it's a launchpad to a realm Aizen can't even touch. A massive pillar of light dominates Aizen's mind. This freak is coding his own custom class. The dude stands frozen in the hall, crushed by the weight of this massive lore drop. Aizen drops his hand, still rebooting from the scanned data. The veteran's hand shakes, unable to process the spawn of such a broken character. Lucian stares back, chilling, acting oblivious to the server crash he just caused. Aizen demands to know when the hell he unlocked the max tier of mana circulation. Lucian plays dumb, asking what endgame even means. Aizen explains his scan found an impossibly clean circuit board inside him. He likens the kid's mana to pure snow, running on an optimized water wheel setup that hits maximum efficiency. The Sword Saint calls this a legendary tier that takes martial arts, means a lifetime of grinding to unlock. Lucian's eyes shift. He knew his cover would blow, but didn't expect a perfect score. Energy floods his brain. There's 0 point hiding his boss stats anymore. Aizen Breitner spaces out, remembering his own struggles with leveling up. Across from him, Lucian acts shell-shocked. Standing in the epic arena, the Sword Saint claims nobody below his rank could decode this anomaly. Lucian confesses he only started circulation a month ago, and his circuits auto-unlocked on day 1. Aizen's sharp green eyes lock on, absorbing every frame of the kid's insane backstory. Lucian drops more lore. He heard circulation usually causes agonizing debuffs and bottlenecks, but he coasted with 0 lag. Aizen turns his back, exhaling hard. Lucian's raw talent mocks his own decades of sweaty grinding. Aizen's shadow stretches as he mutters about ancient op legends splitting mountains. Guess they weren't fake news. The Sword Saint turns back with a dead serious face, ready to drop a massive bombshell despite the disrespect. Lucian's eyes go wide, hearing an offer to trash his Valdec heir status. He takes massive psychic damage, wondering why Sir Aizen would demand he throw away a god-tier rank. Panicking, Lucian clutches his head, fearing his hardware is corrupted and locks him out of sword arts and mana. Catching the kid's pale face, Aizen smiles and declares it's the exact opposite of a debuff. He extends a dramatic hand, branding Lucian's body as the ultimate ultra-rare vessel. A glowing golden mana tree spawns in Aizen's mind. He hypes the kid's limitless ceiling that shatters normal caps. Staring him down, the Sword Saint paints a future. If he dumps all his skill points into the sword path. A holy blue laser beams down on Lucian's avatar, claiming the next Sword Saint title is a guaranteed speedrun. Lucian's pupils expand. He never imagined his build could reach Sword Saint levels. Staring at his palms, Lucian knew he was buffed, but Aizen's hype shatters his wildest theories. A towering mountain peak flashes at sunset. Thanks to looting the Lionheart Sword manual, he found a secret route. Gripping a deadly cliff face, Lucian relives his past life's desperate hunger for the top rank. His face hardens into steel. He finally locked onto his true main quest. An eagle soars through the sky. Lucian grinds up the mountain, the ultimate metaphor for scaling the PvP ladder. But the hype dies when Sir Aizen warns this raid won't be a cakewalk. Lucian stares at him, asking if the ultimatum drops because dual classing as a noble and a Sword Saint is banned. Aizen nods, looking grim as he confirms the kid's spot-on read of the meta. Checking his hands, the old veteran confesses his own timer is running out to carry the kid through both skill trees. Even with mana keeping him moving like a rookie at nearly a century old, the aging debuff is eating his HP. He explains that downloading his entire moveset before he logs out requires an insane training schedule, even if Lucian main classes the sword. Lucian calculates the math. In his past life's lore, the Sword Saint dies in 8 years. The clock is ticking. From behind, Lucian looks isolated. Theoretically, he wants to smash the accept button and main the sword, but a ruined battlefield loads in. The apocalyptic future proves that raw melee stats won't save him from the server wipe. A sword sticks in the dirt next to the Lionheart flag. Surviving that chaos demands the legitimacy of a faction leader. Lucian clenches his fist, adding that reality forces him to pass on the drop he wanted forever. In the massive hall, Lucian drops an apology to Sir Aizen, vowing to keep his Valdec tag until the end. He bows, showing gratitude for the legendary offer, but declining it to carry the family aggro. Aizen looks away, crushed, kicking himself for throwing the kid into this brutal dialogue tree. Staring at his boots, the veteran realizes old age turned him into a greedy player. Aizen stands frozen, oozing depression as his plan to leave a legacy patch through Lucien gets deleted. Lucien watches his master's back, a spark of pure ambition igniting in his eyes. A smirk breaks his poker face as Lucien kills the dead silence. "Sir Aizen, is there a backdoor for?" Aizen whips his head around, shocked by the sudden pivot in his student's code. An epic glow surrounds Lucien kneeling with a sword. He asks if there's an exploit to clear both quests. Lucien Valdex smirks, pressing a finger to his lips, cooking up a galaxy brain play involving another upcoming prodigy. Cut to a pristine blue sky, sunshine blasting the arena where leaves dance in the wind. Hoofbeats spam the dirt, kicking up dust clouds under massive horsepower. Joshua Valdek pilots a dark brown stallion through a sick jump, dripping with cocky energy. A butler sprints into the yard from afar, gasping for air, carrying emergency intel. Voice shaking, he confirms the wild rumors about the third son are facts. Joshua yanks the reins, forcing the horse to rear up and slam the brakes right in front of the panicked butler. He freezes, brain rejecting the fact that the meme stories just became reality. Joshua's golden eyes burn with fury. He refuses to accept the brain-dead trash tier got a successor ticket. He vaults off the horse with an aggressive, impatient dismount. The butler drops the bomb. Lucien is currently getting private coaching from the legendary sword saint, Sir Aizen. Joshua's gaze drops, dark energy hijacking his brain over his brother's massive XP boost. He grinds his teeth. Building his own faction while dodging two boss-tier older brothers was hell, and now a new roadblock spawns. His face contorts with rage, realizing the neutral players now have an alt pick. He spikes his handkerchief into the dirt, radiating pure disgust and saltiness. Joshua screams, asking why Lucien couldn't stay rotting in his dark corner, making the butler beg him to lower his volume. Pointing a finger at the NPC, he roars that he can't chill while his hard-earned faction starts wavering. Even the horse senses the murderous rage boiling in its master's veins at calling Lucien brother. Joshua bites his black glove, brain spinning out of control as his grip on the game slips. His eyes flash with a cold, killer instinct. He needs a cheat code to delete this threat before it hits max level. Turning his back on the butler, Joshua orders 2 live steel blades, claiming Lucien needs a real PvP match. The head butler freezes, dread painting his face over the young master's psycho request. Leaning on his horse, Joshua clarifies he doesn't want wooden practice toys, but lethal combat steel. Flashing a twisted, bloodthirsty grin, Joshua plans to teach Lucien a brutal lesson that his trash status never really changed. Lucien turns to Aizen. What if a true freak of nature drops in? I mean an alt player besides me. Hand on his chest, he smiles and promises that while the matchmaking might take time, this recruit will cover all current lag. Aizen stares into the distance, imagining a player broken enough to leave a scar on a sword saint. The duo faces off in the massive yard. The old man sighs that even in 100 years, pulling a unit like that is RNG hell. Aizen presses his lips together, going AFK in his thoughts over something heavy. He shoots Lucien a complex look, sighing that he feels guilty stacking so much aggro on the young master's shoulders. Aizen drops a warmer smile, touched by Lucien's loyalty, and tells him to stop stressing over an old fossil. Lucien reads the sword saint's face, while Aizen gives a nod to acknowledge the kid's respect. Staring at his feet, Lucien figures Aizen probably flagged his pitch as pure cap. He gets why a level 1 noob offering to pull an elite SSR unit for a sword saint sounds like a troll post. Lucien's face darkens, blonde bangs hiding his true UI. But a menacing smirk creeps up his face, silently telling the old man to wait for the incoming patch drop. A snowy biome loads in Lucien's mind, where a purple-haired warrior solos the frozen wasteland. The guy rocks a frail hitbox and spams a trash-tier sword art, but his blade leaks pure death aura. Running on pure talent, the dude morphed into a walking Grim Reaper, wiping the server on a brutal battlefield. One swing triggers a whiteout explosion, launching all mobs out of his way. Blood geysers from their necks. The grunts drop dead before their screens even render the attack animation. The razor-sharp edge bypasses armor, leaving 0 survival rate for the enemy team. Amidst the blizzard, the purple-haired demon strolls through the wiped squad, his longsword dripping red. A clean flick clears the blood from his blade, leaving a horror show in his wake. This is Sword Demon Felix, a boss name that will traumatize the entire continent in upcoming patches. Lucian vows to recruit him as his top loyalist and the perfect vessel for Aizen's legacy code. Snapping back to reality, Lucian faces the training dummy with a wooden sword, ready for stage 1. Aizen watches with crossed arms, demanding Lucian showcase his current stats before unlocking new skills. The old man orders a combo of vertical, horizontal, and diagonal slashes on the wooden target. Lucian narrows his eyes, entering the zone to sync his mana flow to the exact specs. He grips the wooden hilt tight, feeling the lag of using a sword with Lucian's unleveled hardware for the first time. Testing a few swings, he reminds himself to throttle his DPS since this body can't handle his old max output. He drops his center of gravity, golden eyes locking onto the target like a predator spotting prey. He stores a massive breath, dumping all his focus into the basic wooden weapon. The sword drops at supersonic speed, painting a straight white laser right down the dummy's center. A brutal horizontal sweep follows instantly, the blade screaming through the air with insane kinetic energy. Next up is a clean diagonal slash. Lucian pivots like a dancer, leaving glowing trails tracing his hitboxes. He wraps the basic combo with a rock-solid guard stance, aiming for the finisher. Mana floods the wooden sword, making it glow with a heavy, blinding blue aura. Lucian's eyes flare, burning all his stamina for this ultimate strike. A savage swing rocks the wooden dummy, compressing the very air in the arena. The mana shockwave spawns mini tornadoes, whipping up a dust storm center stage. The gale force wind kicks up dirt, masking Lucian's character model for a second. When the dust settles, the dummy's armor is wrecked, raining debris onto the stone floor with a massive clatter. Lucian holds his end pose, his stamina bar barely dropping despite the heavy combo. He grades his own animation as a bit clunky, but passable for a level 1 account. Standing in the silent yard, he wonders if the Sword Saint wants to drop more modifiers on his run. Aizen stays quiet, his hawk eyes scanning every pixel of the kid's form. Finally, he smirks, admitting he knew the kid was cracked, but this demo broke his expectations again. But his next review hits like a truck. To be blunt, it's pathetic. Lucian freezes, demanding an explanation while Aizen strolls up with his wooden sword resting on his shoulder. He ruthlessly points out that every swing carried toxic habits that ruin the meta. Closing the gap, Aizen roasts the kid's form as looking like a desperate merc fighting for scraps. He lectures that by hard focusing on raw speed and DPS, Lucian broke the sync between his body and mana, leaving massive fatal hitboxes. The Sword Saint drops a trick question: how long does it take to fully coat a sword in mana? Lucian shoots straight, claiming his cast time sits around 1 to 2 seconds. Aizen's glare turns lethal as he repeats that casual 1 to 2 second answer. Lucian's pupils shrink as invisible pressure crushes him from the master's aggro. In a literal blink, Aizen launches a strike faster than server ping, the wooden tip aiming right at Lucian. He drops a cold warning that tiny cast window is enough for an enemy to score a one-hit KO. The wooden tip stops a millimeter from Lucian's throat, leaving him frozen with sweat as the massive level gap hits him. Aizen towers over him, statting the tutorial begins with understanding the weight of a game over, because enemies punish every dropped frame. Staring down the blade at his neck, Lucian realizes his massive ego almost got him deleted. A brutal reality check crashes his brain. He played that like an absolute idiot. He pictures his head rolling away before his ping even registers the hit, destroying his past life superiority complex. Lucian bows his head, vowing to burn this lecture into his code and overhaul his entire combat engine. Aizen flashes a proud smirk at the kid's willingness to patch his bugs. He adds that god-tier hardware means nothing without the mana engine. Spamming physical attacks just begs for a game over. The master's wooden sword erupts with neon green mana, flexing true endgame DPS. He starts teaching the harmony mechanic, where internal and external stats fuse into one broken multiplier. A soft breeze circles the practice dummy. Nothing seems to trigger. Then a god-tier pressure bomb nukes the dummy, shaking the entire map. In a microsecond, the wooden dummy gets shredded, polygons blasting everywhere. Aizen sheathes his sword, confirming this is the mandatory skill tree Lucian must unlock. Fast forward a few days. The brutal boot camp rages on under the Valdek estate's blue sky. Wooden swords clash with deafening crunches, tracking the young master's insane grind. Lucian spams attacks, but Aizen parries everything, barking at him to keep the mana stream stable. Every block from the sword Saint boasts pixel-perfect accuracy, forcing Lucian to burn all his cooldowns. The kid charges with burning eyes, while Aizen preaches that mana control requires the same brutal grind as physical leveling. Mana must hit the exact collision point on the exact frame. No early inputs, no lag. Aizen scans for micro-errors, stressing the flawless sync of all combat mechanics. Lucian jumps for a heavy plunge attack, but Aizen tanks the ultimate with one hand like it's nothing. "You gotta hit like this to unlock the sword's real damage," Aizen shouts, launching his student across the arena. Lucian skids across the dirt, kicking up a dust cloud, but keeps his camera locked on the boss. He forces himself up, shaking hands gripping the weapon, ready for Phase 2 despite sitting at 1 HP. Dripping sweat, Lucian bites his lip, tanking the insane debuff aura his master outputs. Watching the kid's grit, Aizen's mouth curves into a Hypeman's grin. Raising his glowing green sword, he orders Lucian to brace for the next heavy hit. Aizen initiates an advanced combo to break Lucian's level cap. He flexes an elite attack pattern, explaining how to read enemy frame data and vectors for perfect parries. Aizen hoists his wooden blade, radiating massive green energy for the next strike. Lucian studies the boss, realizing the secret tech is hitting a natural flow state by deleting all input lag and tension. He figures out this deletes all hurt boxes and minimizes stamina drain for maximum burst damage. Aizen yells at Lucian to keep his crosshair dead center and not flinch at the boss's aura. Lucian dashes in, sword glowing blue, eyes broadcasting pure, unfiltered hype. The weapons collide center stage, triggering a massive mana shockwave that hits the skybox. Gritting his teeth under the crushing weight, sweat pours down as Lucian tries to push the boss back. Aizen keeps a bored face, effortlessly neutralizing the kid's ultimate strike with zero effort. A blinding mana explosion detonates at the clash point, flashing the whole arena. Aizen's lethal gaze cuts through the smoke, proving he's playing this raid dead serious. Wooden blades blur at hyper speed, leaving glitchy light trails across the map. Raid over for today. Aizen lowers his weapon, demanding Lucian save this sensory data to his hard drive. Flashing a rare smile, he promises mastering just this mechanic will boost Lucian to S tier. Lucian crashes to the dirt, panting with zero stamina but max satisfaction after the hellish run. The young master sits frozen in the wrecked yard, muscles dead, sweating a river. He chugs oxygen, golden eyes still glowing with the high of unlocking a new skill tree. After his HP regens a bit, Lucian drops massive respect for the Sword Saint's carry. The post-raid arena looks apocalyptic, with shattered stone tiles decorating the floor. An NPC servant shivers nearby, horrified that the young master survived such a brutal hardcore mode. The janitor crew scrambles to clean the mess, throwing panicked looks at the kid. The mansion's main hall bathes in the sunset, weirdly quiet after the ear-piercing combat sounds. Lucian leans on the cold wall, a relieved smile proving he just experienced a massive character evolution. Somehow I didn't get a game over today, he thinks, savoring the rare AFK moment. His hands twitch from the grind, but he knows this hardcore server is paying off. He believes this is the only patch to wipe the corrupted files from his past life, holding him back. Lucian welcomes the pain if it acts as the toll gate to the server's #1 rank. Tracing the dents on his wooden sword, he thanks it for unlocking game mechanics he never knew existed. Watching Aizen meditate in the distance, radiating boss energy, Lucian respects his massive stats. He realizes Aizen rigged the encounters to push him into a corner and trigger an awakening. This proves the master reads his stats perfectly, showing hidden support behind a cold NPC face. Lucian gives full control to the carry, feeling his stats spike with every cell. The mechanics of harmony and mana flow are now permanently installed in his brain. Touching the cracks on the wood, he realizes the true meta always lived inside him. He clenches his fist, locking in his iron will to conquer all upcoming boss fights. Deep down, regret hits him, wishing he found this walkthrough earlier in his past playthrough. Past life memories play like a dark cutscene, showing the final raid where his account got wiped. The Supreme Commander's massive boss model dominates the burning battlefield in his mind. He wonders if his old trash tier build ever had a chance of scratching that ruthless raid boss. He thought he could have traded blows with the Supreme Commander. He imagines he could have triggered a much more epic, high DPS final stand. Glitchy memories of a brutal, balanced dual surface, a scenario where veteran Jake didn't get wiped. His past L's fuel his current grind to max level. Snapping back, Lucian chills on the cold stone, gripping his weapon while analyzing his old combat logs. He feels his stamina bar isn't fully empty and refuses to log off before testing Aizen's new patch in PvP. Mid-thought, Lucian craves a random encounter to test his new buffs. Footsteps echo, breaking his focus and forcing him to pan his camera back. Joshua Valdek struts into the arena with the head butler, radiating smug energy as he approaches the duo. Sword Saint Aizen narrows his eyes, locking his green crosshairs onto the incoming fourth young master. Joshua flashes a fake smile and bows, dropping the master title to flex his student status. Aizen returns a frosty greeting, demanding the reason for this unscripted event. When Aizen tells Joshua to bounce because he's running a tutorial for Lucian, Joshua drops a counteroffer. The butler sweats bullets nearby, nervously wiping his forehead in the danger zone. A toxic grin paints Joshua's face, his eyes targeting Lucian with obvious griefing intent. He loudly offers to help his newly awakened brother grind some XP, playing the role of the veteran player. Joshua extends a hand, baiting Lucian into a PvP duel under the guise of brotherly sparring. Lucian's face darkens with a bloodthirsty grin. He silently cheers as the perfect test dummy walks right into his trap.